Ja, wir sind random live. Ihr seht es vielleicht schon im Hintergrund. Wir sehen jetzt gleich ein Showmatch. Astra Militarum gegen Aeldari. Ich dachte mir einfach, das kann ich mir nicht entgehen lassen. Hab den Twitch-Kanal eingeschaltet und werde jetzt streamen. Und ich sehe gerade, dass ihr mein Bild nicht seht, weil mein Wasserzeichen im Weg ist. Das heißt, ich werde mich mal nach hier oben bewegen. Wir haben 2:08 Uhr. Wir sehen hier schön zwei Stratagems. Ich werde jetzt mal noch mal ganz kurz ein bisschen Werbung machen hier nebenbei. Und dann hoffe ich einfach mal, dass vielleicht noch der ein oder andere Langschläfer noch dabei ist. Und das hier anschaut. Ansonsten morgen früh. Ich kann nicht versprechen, ob ich die vollen 3 Stunden Spiel durchhalte. Holy moly. Aber ich werde auf jeden Fall tun, was ich kann. Dass das hier ein cooler Stream wird. Und ich werde euch mal meine Meinung dazu mitteilen und so weiter. Ist auf jeden Fall wild. Wie gesagt, ich habe jetzt extra auf dieses Ding gewartet. Habe heute Nachmittag ein Schläfchen gemacht. Bin verrückt. Aber wir sehen jetzt Aeldari das erste Mal im Spiel. Und ich will mal hoffen, und ich will mal schauen, wie das Ganze abläuft. Ich hoffe, ihr könnt ein bisschen mitgucken. Und es kommt noch der ein oder andere dazu. Überrascht mich jetzt aber auch nicht, wenn da jetzt nicht noch mehr Leute dazu kommen. Ich muss mal hier noch ein bisschen nebenbei Programme schließen, damit wir hier einen flüssigeren Ablauf haben. Ansonsten hoffe ich jetzt einfach alle mal, dass ihr mich gut hören könnt, gut sehen könnt. Was haben wir noch gesehen? Wir haben noch 2 weitere Stratagems gesehen. Und zwar einfach völlig random. Völlig random. Gerade hier ein Guard Secondary. So, ich muss mal ganz kurz gucken, ob da jemand... hat. Ah ja, genau, wir haben 2 Relikte gesehen und wir haben 2 Stratagems gesehen. Das eine war das Phoenix Gem, da steht man wieder auf die 2+. Und das andere war die Death Mask of Olanius, die sagt, wenn man das ihm offiziell gibt, kriegt er nur -1 von seiner Objective Control abgezogen statt 1. Dann gibt es den Fainted Retreat als Stratagem für 1 CP, für Battle Host. Das ist Fallback, Shoot oder Charge. Shoot and Charge. Für eine Einheit. Richtig stark. Das andere habt ihr ja schon quasi gerade gesehen. Holy moly. Also ich bin schon ein bisschen hyped auf diese Aeldari jetzt. Hab da richtig Bock drauf. Das sieht richtig gut aus. Wir haben vorhin auch den Wyvern vom Guard gesehen. Also auch die Guard sieht cool aus. Kann also euch nur sagen, das wird cool. Und wie gesagt, wer jetzt nicht dabei ist, sieht hier das Spiel und wir sehen gerade, wer die spielt. Nick Nanavati spielt die Aeldari, Mr. Brown Magic himself gegen Andrew Gonyo mit seinem Astra Militarum. Das wird auf jeden Fall also auch 2 Top-Spieler, die das Ganze rüberbringen. Jetzt hat der Nick Nanavati den ganzen Tag schon das Kansas City Open gehostet und gestreamt und kriegt jetzt noch ein Spiel hinten rein, das er dann spielen darf. Der Mann lebt 40k. Der Mann lebt 40k. So, ich hoffe einfach, dass das jetzt bald losgeht. Wie gesagt, die wollten eigentlich um 2 Uhr starten. Jetzt haben wir irgendwie Viertel nach. Nicht gedacht, dass das sich so hinzieht. Aber man tut eben, was man kann. So, ich gucke jetzt mal noch ganz kurz, ob ich die Bitrate ein bisschen runtersetzen kann. Aber eigentlich soll das passen. Mein Rechner läuft irgendwie schon den ganzen Tag. Kann natürlich auch sein, dass es daran dann liegt. Ja, gucken wir einfach mal. Und die meisten werden das als Aufzeichnung anschauen, von daher ist es gar nicht so wichtig. Sie sind da.
Warhammer Games Workshop. My name is Paul Murphy. I'm joined by Mike Brandt.
I'm Mike Brandt, and we are here for another game of 10th edition, a 2,000-point game. And tonight has a different vibe than last night. It's Friday night. It's a Friday night fights kind of a thing. It's a Friday night lights kind of a situation.
It's gonna be a shootout.
So we have, last night we had very much a game between 2 very boisterous, very excited content creators from Bell Lost Souls and Goonhammer. They went through a very casual, lightweight, fun game. This game will also be lightweight and fun, but between two people who know each other well and have battled each other in the tournament scene
Mike,
for better than a decade together.
We've been playing up this rivalry all day. It is
talking
real.
about it?
It is
It's very
real.
good.
These players are going to be at each other's throats.
Well, no, let's talk
Also
about
anscheinend
that.
haben die auch wieder
Nick
Probleme.
and Andrew go back years. So Nick Nanavati has
And great
played,
friends.
Yes,
Yeah.
Nick Nanavati, obviously one of our commentators. He's part of Art of War. He is a well-known tournament player and an all-around great guy. He has won GTs and the like all over the world. Andrew Gagno, former Captain America, was on the Team America team that won the World Team Championships one year. He won our best overall championship.
Yeah, playing Tau.
Just short to killing, actually, but was in the finals last year. So these are two exceptional players, and what we've asked them to do, basically, so each of them are part of the content creator program, so they've just barely recently had access to the rules to try and slightly familiarize themselves with them. And
These?
yeah, these rules, exactly. Well, of course, this is not the artwork is exciting, but we released the rules today, so everyone should have actual good Cliffs Notes they can look at. Just download that file from Warhammer Community and use it to follow along with the rules and try and understand some of what's going on in the game. Style lists.
War dann doch mein Rechner, der das
2000
aufgehängt
And the
hat.
gloves are off.
Wie
It is
gesagt,
a
der
full
kämpft ein
game.
bisschen.
We've said, whatever happens, we'll keep the
Gegebenenfalls
airwaves
werde ich gleich die
interesting if it
Videoqualität
goes
ein bisschen
pear-shaped for
runterstellen.
one player or the other. But we kind of
Anyhow,
want to show the
es geht
different
darum, dass wir
aspects
gleich
of Warhammer over the course
Reactions
of these
haben
2 nights. And
und
so you're
gucken
going to actually
können,
see what the
was
Aeldari and
passiert
the Astra
und wer ist
Militarum
mit
can
dabei.
do. We have a whole bunch of data sheets in play. We'll be sharing
Leute,
them
ich
with
bin
you all
hyped.
evening long. We'll be doing
Ich hoffe, ihr
calls
auch.
to Warner. What we've got in this situation tonight is that they,
So, bin wieder zurück.
as we say, the gloves are off, as it were. So I was listening to Andrew
Bildqualität
earlier,
ein bisschen
looking at the different
runtergedreht, sollte jetzt besser
stratagems
sein.
and the different rules that his different
Ich
units
hoffe,
have
das
and how they
funktioniert
work
jetzt
together.
einfach
It's like, oh, I
gut.
could do this thing, and I'm like, yes, you
Ansonsten,
can.
wie gesagt, spät,
So
Late
it'll be
Night.
really fascinating to see how they different, these different players from last night's players,
Late
the different angle they
Night,
can take it, approaching the game and the
40K.
additions. We can see how well the different missions and everything else fit into all the different ways that you can play Warhammer. And it's one of the things that's really important, I know, to the design studio and to Warhammer as a whole, is that we have a larger base of customers than ever before, and they all consume the hobby in their own different ways. And so we really wanted to show off over the course of these past 2 nights just the different ways that Warhammer in the new edition can be enjoyed and consumed and played. And so it's really exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, folks have tuned in to watch. We got folks here watching in the event
It's gonna
hall.
be really exciting.
We got folks looking at the TV of the event hall.
Yeah,
We again the stream. It's like it's almost the stream
There's
is
a giant
everywhere.
Space Marine
Folks are
right
hanging
there.
out. We're having a shared experience here, and we get to be here several feet from the table. They can't necessarily hear us while we're doing our analysis.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of analysis of what they should and shouldn't be doing over the course of the evening. It'll be quite fun. We're going to share a whole bunch of cool data sheets. And there's some really exciting units that the two of them are bringing to bear. Now, Andrew Gagno has leaned heavy into, he's a heavily converted guard army. It's gorgeous. It's one of the best painted armies here at the event. I think it's made the showcase tomorrow already. So it's a beautiful army. It's one of those rare breeds
We got
where
to see
he's
some of this
mastered-
stuff on the stream
Yeah, and
earlier.
he's
Also
really
für die Leute, die es noch
every
nicht
aspect
kennen,
of the
hier
hobby. He's
Mike
extremely
Brandt
well-known
ist
player. He paints
der
better
Head
than
of
most
Organized
painters out
Play
there.
für,
He's got, like,
für
extensive
GW
blending
in
and
den
wet
USA
blending
und
and
war früher der
no
Orga
metal
der
on his
Nova
models. It's
Open.
really a stunning army. So
Und Paul
Patrick
Murphy
is
ist
playing-
ein sehr bekannter Shoutcaster und
I mean, again, something that you kind of
40K
you aspire
Influencer.
to be in the
And
hobby.
he's got a blend of the old and the new. So his list has Scout Sentinels. His list has Leontis, the new
So, ich hoffe, ihr habt jetzt wenigstens ein
supreme
bisschen besseres
leader, as
Bild.
it were, of the Astra Militarum. We have a lot of different interesting things that are in play. And the core of his list is centered around heavy use of the Death Corps of Krieg, which are a really interesting
Shovels?
infantry regiment. Shovels are
Gegebenenfalls
part
müsst
of
ihr ein
their
bisschen
whole
zurückspulen und
experience.
euch das
And of
danach
course,
wirklich
they're
anschauen.
inspired
Mein
by,
Computer buffert ein bisschen.
you know, dying for the emperor, as it were, right? And
Yeah,
so
basically you're making the ultimate sacrifice.
making the ultimate sacrifice. And so their rules, just like a lot of what has been done with the new edition, are really focused on not only
Twitch ist aber auch eine Webseite, die ich nicht oft
So
besuche.
I think we should start things off while the players get familiar with their lists and everything by taking a look at the Death Corps of Krieg data sheet. What do you guys think? You want to take a look at that?
Let's do it. We have not seen it. That has not been.
Hier sehen wir übrigens auch das neue
All
Gelände.
right, well, let's take a look at that Death Corps data sheet
Wir
then.
sehen, dass die auch auf diesen Plexiglasplatten
We'll pull
stehen,
that up here in just a
aber dass die
second.
deutlich
Tech Priest
kleiner
Warner
sind als
bringing
die,
it
die
on
wir bis
top
jetzt
of
schon
the
gesehen
OBS
haben.
here, and so once it's out, we'll go through the focus and the function of how
Death Corps Krieg
Death Corps
Datasheet.
work.
Gleich mal analysieren.
of Warhammer
Crimson
4000.
Männer,
His army primarily
wenn die
focuses on the Death Corps
Starting
as an actual
Strength
unit.
sind, +1 zu Hit, also und +1 zu Wound, wenn sie unter halber Sollstärke sind. Quasi das Äquivalent
Sir, we've
zum
got a call coming in
zu
from
den
the table.
Sisters.
They're letting us know that the
Voxcaster
missions
ist hier
have been
wieder
generated.
+1
We'll
hier
talk about those missions
Superior
in a second.
Cycle.
Let's start with
Und
the Death Corps of
du
Krieg.
kriegst
A couple things to
D3
go
Destroyed
over.
Death
First off,
Corps
you see the
Trooper
warrior
zurück,
ability here.
wenn diese
One of the things
Einheit
you really wanna
in der
look at
Command Phase
first
unter
and
Starting
foremost
Strength ist.
with the Death Corps of
Gefällt mir
Krieg
gut.
is the Death Corps Meta Pack. So these guys are, you know, sort of VAT born, as it were, is my understanding, and they've got a whole bunch of ability with their med pack to get back up. So if you don't finish off a death score squad, a couple of them can come back. And then the functionality of Grim Demeanor is really important. So once they take any damage at all, they add 1 to their hit roll and get more accurate. And if they are below half strength, they actually
Und
add
so wie es
1 to
aussieht,
their
kann man
wound
der
roll
Einheit 2
as
Leader
well.
anschließen.
And so they can
Solange die
equip a wide variety
keine
of things in their unit. They can be
Command
taken from
Squads sind.
10-man,
Solange die
20-man
Command Squads sind.
squads. And the 10-man squads, of course, have a sergeant, a watchmaster, along
Ich
with
bin mal
troopers.
gespannt, ob man die
And
noch
then, of course,
sieht.
if you double it up, you get double the number of watchmasters for the larger platoon.
You got to keep them in line somehow.
Absolutely got to keep them in line. So that's how they work. You can see how the Voxcaster works in the new edition. You can also notice that the Death Corps can have 2 characters attached to them. So as long as one of them is a command squad, they can have a second leader attached to the unit. And this is a really effective way of reflecting the very interesting ways in which things like regimental attaches attached to command squads, hint, hint, wink, wink, and other sorts of things in the sort of formulation and function of the Astra Militarum.
We saw a bit of that with the Death Guard yesterday about how some of their units can blend into to attach units.
Ich
And
bin
how
gespannt,
that
ob man einen
functions.
ganzen Command
Exactly, and
Squad
we'll see
jetzt
some
noch
other
anschließen
characters
kann.
later on in the evening as we meander through this game, where we're going to see things like
Ob man dann wirklich so einen
Primaire
fetten
Psychers, and how
18
they
plus
might join
5
along
Mann
with the
Trupp hat.
command squad, of course, how the command squads themselves work. And we're going to see Leontis. So we'll talk about Leontis once he starts getting into the action
Dom
in
Niffy says,
the game.
okay, I guess I'll build the Core Krieg. It's actually kind of hard not to want to put some of this stuff on the table.
It is.
Right now with
one of
the excitement.
Nick
One of
stellt
the
schon
best things
auf.
about
Guck mal, was da sonst noch
what
so,
I think
was da sonst noch
reckon
so
is one of
kommt.
the best things about the new edition is you've really tried to
Diese
encourage
Videoqualität
variety,
regt mich ein
not
bisschen auf.
through, sort of constriction of list construction.
Die
We're
regt
saying
mich ein
you
bisschen
must take
auf.
X number of these units and X number of those units, but instead spreading what used to be something like a
Ich
strategy
glaube,
or
ich
whatnot
muss
into the
nebenbei
ability
Discord
functionality of
ausmachen.
the units
Einfach.
themselves. And what this does
Ach,
is
guck mal, Zoom
encourages
läuft
a
noch. Kein
variety of
Wunder.
units and list
Schließen
building,
wir auch mal.
because that's the best
Discord
way to get
brauchen
the
wir auch nicht.
functionality in the battlefield that you want to see. And a good example of that
Steam
would be
brauchen wir
like
auch
how you see the
nicht.
functionality of the
So, mal
Scout
alles
Sentinels
rausschmeißen, was hier
in a
irgendwie
bit, how
meine
they interact with some of
meine
the
Leistung
functionality within
beeinträchtigt.
Andrew's army. But now that we've taken a
Ich habe
look at the
schließlich noch
Death
mein
Corps of Krieg,
Mein
I
Handy.
think we'll get ourselves a look at this battlefield, and we should start to talk about the mission, I think, right?
We can talk about the missions. Yep,
Paul,
Servo
what are you
Skulls.
most
Ah, wir
excited
sehen jetzt die
about about this
Missions.
game in general,
The
then?
game in general is like you hit it on the head just a few minutes ago. Is like the actual like feel and vibe of the units making its way onto the data slate. So when you actually get that thing out of the box, get it on the table, it kind of behaves like you expect it to in your imagination. The thing that got you to put it
Ah,
on
wir
the
sehen
table in the
Wavan,
first
wir
place.
sehen Basilisken.
And the
Oh,
Blade
das
is
wird
a very
schön.
lethal Eldari army, so of course we're going to see their functionality in action.
Wir
But
sehen eine
why don't we take
D-Kanone.
a look at this
You talking about
battlefield?
the resilience of being able to use that meta pack, I think is what you're referring to.
Why
Hier
don't we
sehen
take a
wir
look at
jetzt
this battlefield
die
and make sure Tech
Ausrüstungsoptionen, die die
Priest
Jungs
Warner,
haben.
who is
Aber
having
das
a
war jetzt
chat
nur
with
ganz
the
kurz
table
da.
boss right now, gets us the
Oh, schaut euch das mal
primary
an.
mission out there.
2 Wyvern, 2 Basilisken. Da sehen wir direkt mal Competitive Play.
As that gets pulled up, we'll
Vipers,
talk about the
kleine
fact that
Vipers,
in
wahrscheinlich alle mit
general,
Bright Lances.
there's
Shadow
9 different
Weaver,
primary missions
Warwalker.
in the new
Das wird wahrscheinlich das
edition
neue
of Warhammer
Elder-Meta.
40,000. And they are all quite different. So today, most of the primary missions are some variation of take and hold, which is to hold one mission, one objective, 2 objectives, or more objectives in your command phase. And those mission concepts, those sort of like traditional hold 1, 2 more sort of objectives, are still part of the primary deck. But you guys have seen those for several years. They've actually been the most popular mission sort of batch that we've ever seen before. And with this edition, we really wanted to add some variety
For
to that
match
primary
play,
experience.
a little bit of a consistent experience across all tables.
Consistent, but a little variety is good. And so we spent a bunch of time in the lab, going back to the lab again, and building that variety into the missions that we now have.
Jetzt
And
sehen wir die
Deploy
Mission.
Servo Skulls is a great example that we wanted to show
Deploy
off
Servo
of a
Skulls.
very different mission that's much more
Was haben wir
engaging
hier?
than the missions where you stand on static objectives throughout the course of the game. And the reason for that is when you hold an objective that is in no man's land. So you'll notice in no man's land we have this objective, and this objective to start with on that deployment zone. And I think we might go back to that deployment zone and Servo Skulls images there. And in this situation, these 3 objectives are the ones that really matter for the Servo Skulls primary. Now for tactical objectives, those secondary decks, the objectives in your home deployment zone still do matter, but they don't matter for scoring the primary in this mission. So you get nothing for sitting on your home objective.
Also, you got to be a little bit mobile. Got to get out there and maybe risk it. Risk engagement, getting too close to the opponent.
Got to get up in that
Das ist
battlefield.
spannend,
And
das ist die
the way
zweite
it's
Mission, wo
scored
der
is
Homebase-Marker nicht zählt.
anytime you end your turn, so not the command phase, but end your turn in control of a Servo Skull, what happens is you can move it. And you can move it up to 6 inches anywhere you want to. You could move it in a straight line if you wanted to. You could also move it in any direction, as long as it's up to 6 inches. And when you move it, that Servo Skull gets closer to, presumably, your opponent's deployment zone. And the closer you get it to your opponent's deployment zone, you can imagine it's like pushing a battle line, where the servo skulls effectively are markers representing a battle line. And the more you push that battle line toward your opponent's side of the battlefield, the more points you collect at the end of each turn.
Very interesting.
Das ist sehr spannend.
So you can move them.
Wenn man die Marker kontrolliert, kann man sie bewegen. Und je näher sie an der gegnerischen Aufstellungszone sind, desto mehr Punkte sind sie wert.
You can move it again in your opponent's turn, but you score it in your own turn.
As a list builder, these are the types of things that excite me. I start to think about how can I interact with that. What type of units do I have to put into my army that can both interact with the objectives and then also deal with the consequences of interacting with the objectives.
Kann man ihn am Ende der Runde
closer
bewegen.
to certain types of opponents.
Und man kann ihn dann quasi auch auf die gegnerische Aufstellungszone zubewegen. Wenn er in 12 von der Aufstellungszone ist, kriegt man 2 Punkte, wenn er in 6 ist, 5 und wenn er in der Deployment Zone ist, kriegt man 8 Punkte. Das bevorzugt natürlich extrem aggressive Armeen. Und was wir halt auch wieder sehen, ist, dass die Marker im No Man's Land sehr, sehr wichtig sind, aber die Homebase-Marker sind es nicht. Ich weiß nicht, ob das Spiel geil ist.
In order to push those objectives toward their opponent, because they can't just sit there and let them get shoved into their side.
And that may cause, some kind of basically a cost-benefit analysis, almost like judging the value. Do I rush out there now? Do I do this now? Do I wait a turn? What is that turn? What is waiting going to cost me in the long run?
Exactly. And the really fascinating.
Vor allem kann man sie nicht scoren, wenn der Gegner einen überrennt, macht man keine Primärmission mehr. Sehr seltsames Ding. Ihr könnt ja mal schreiben, was ihr davon haltet. Also ich bin ein bisschen skeptisch, dass die ein bisschen überlastet wird. Wir gucken uns mal das nächste an. Chilling Reign, No Additional Rules, also man kann auch das quasi ziehen. Und dann haben wir Search and Destroy als Deployment. Das ist eine ganz seltsame Mission.
But you also are more likely to control where it is when it gets to move again at the end of their turn, which could cause you to get an even bigger push before then.
Das ist eine richtig seltsame Mission.
Some of the games I've played myself for the edition.
Andererseits, der Vorteil ist natürlich, man bekommt die Punkte am Ende der eigenen Runde. Das heißt, man tradet. Man hat nicht mehr Command Phase halten.
So it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not, some of the terrain location in one of these new layouts we're building for the US Open Series for the new edition is actually going to get in the way of where those servo skulls can be placed as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these guys take these.
Mike Brandt erzählt gerade, dass man die Marker nicht inside impassable terrain bewegen darf. Also man darf sie nicht in Wände stellen, man darf sie nicht in irgendwie einen Container reinstellen oder sowas. Man darf sie nicht auf andere Objective-Marker bewegen, aber man darf sie natürlich aufeinander zubewegen, was natürlich auch ganz cool ist. So kann man mit weniger Einheiten die Marker contesten. Da sehen wir die Fire Prism, Jungs. Da sehen wir die Fire Prisms. Es war so klar, dass der Nick da 2 mitbringt. Ist das großartig. Ich bin so gespannt, die ganzen Datenblätter zu sehen. Wir sehen hier auch noch das alternierende Aufstellen der Einheiten. Das bleibt auch uns erhalten. Wir sehen Leontos, 2 Tauruxes. Wir sehen auf jeden Fall eine Menge Guardsmen. Wir sehen eine gute Artillerieburg. Wir sehen oben rechts noch ein bisschen was. Genau, auf der Elder-Seite sehen wir auch Artillerie. Wir sehen einen Wave Serpent. Wir sehen Vipers. Wir sehen Warp Spiders. Wir sehen... sind das Dark Reapers? Ist ein bisschen schwer zu erkennen. Das sieht da unten nach Rangern aus.
And you mean choose to play. You've got the fixed or you've got the cards you can draw.
Fixed or cards you can draw. It's a 16-card deck. Each of those 16 cards has a mission scoring criterion. Of the 16 cards, 7 of them also have a little identifier on them that indicates it could be played as a fixed objective if you wanted to. So when you go up to the table, you and your opponent during the pregame decide, independent of each other, whether your style of play is a planner.
Interessant finde ich vor allem die Layouts, die sie da verwenden. Ich meine, das ist jetzt fürs Showmatch, ne? Aber Mike Brandt ist wie gesagt auch für das ganze Ding zuständig. Sprich, ist wild. Wir haben natürlich jetzt nur noch Obscuring Light Cover. Das heißt, wir haben hier so ein dickes L-Shape, da wo der Nick gerade die 10er-Unit Scorpions reinstellt, mit Karantras drin. Oh Jungs, ich bin jetzt schon hyped. Die Phönixkönige schließen sich ja jetzt den Trupps an. Ja. Oh, ich freue mich drauf, wenn das wirklich gut ist. 10 Scorpions, Jungs. Das wird großartig.
and you go up against a random
Ich glaube, wir haben da
person,
2
and
Units
I
Warps
like
bei
to
das
play
sogar.
Tempest
Ich glaube, das
objectives, and people like to play fixed
könnte
objectives.
richtig
The
spannend
nice thing about the
sein.
mission design is not only have they been careful
Sentinels
to
sehen wir
keep
anscheinend
each
auch
other,
noch.
but you're not forced to play the way your opponent might
Und
want
auch
to play. You
nicht
choose your
wenig.
game, and they choose their game in the primary, just like in both Tempest
Sieht
and
stark danach aus, dass Nick
Eternal
fertig
War
ist mit
Shared.
Aufstellen.
So,
Es gibt kein
this is
Redeploy
really
mehr.
exciting
Phantasm haben wir ja schon gesehen als Stratagem.
because when you play
Auch hier wieder ein gutes Beispiel. Selbst da Topspieler, ne, immer pre-measuren.
When you're just playing a casual game, it can also be really nice.
Also es ist natürlich auch Wilder
instead
Westen,
of
was die
having
Jungs
to
jetzt
think
hier
about
machen.
which fixed objective
Als
works
WTC-Coach
perfectly
finde ich das
wrong,
übrigens ein bisschen
what works
fragwürdig,
the
ob
wrong way.
das
To
zwei
just play
WTC-Spieler der
tactical
USA
for a couple
schon die
minutes
Regeln
before
haben
your
und sich
turn.
schon spielen dürfen.
Wir
Wir in Europa aber noch nicht. Hätte man vielleicht noch mal besser machen können, aber gut. Ich meine, die Jungs verdienen ja Geld mit 40k. Da geht auf jeden Fall noch was.
One of the things I'm really excited about seeing is a lot of people go, well,
Oh,
obviously
hang on a second, Mike. We got some comments in the chat here I want to say. It's like, what? No rust is going to be an easy win for the Aeldari. Now look, these are all fair things to say. It's like this is not a list that you would see in the current edition of Warhammer 40,000. I think on either side of the
It is a new list,
here.
and we'll get to the new lists, and I'm just going to point out the fact that the reason they've chose tactical tonight is because neither player's army leans too heavily into one of the fixed. They both have a lot of mobility. And we've actually worked very hard to make sure that the tactical
Beide
objectives
Spieler haben auch wieder
randomly
Random
drawn
Secondaries
ones
genommen.
are actually just as tournament and competitive ready as the fixed objectives. They're very carefully balanced against each other. And I'm
Was sehen wir auf der
excited to see
Guard-List,
in
auf der
the-
Guard-Seite?
when
Zweimal
the mission
Sentinels,
hits the
zweimal
wild,
Taurox, da wird
how
wahrscheinlich
often
irgendwas
the
drin
difference is
sitzen.
chosen both in casual
Ich weiß nicht, ob es
and
Taurox
competitive.
Prime sind.
That is
terms of the
one-
mission,
Nee,
is
sie haben
one thing
keine
when it
Türme,
actually
also es sind
gets
keine
out there in the
Taurox
hands of
Prime,
the
es sind
people
normale
and start
Taurox.
brewing and thinking about different ways to interact with it. It is
Zwei
absolutely
Basilisken,
amazing.
zwei
Exactly. So,
Wyvern,
Paul,
wahrscheinlich
tell
3
us
Trupps
what kind of army
Guardsmen,
list we
ein paar
see
Command
in the
Squads, so wie es
battlefield as they
aussieht.
are in the midst of deployment. So they're playing
4 Sentinels hat man gesehen, oder 3.
There is. This
Ich hoffe, die zeigen noch, die zeigen noch die gesamte Liste.
You up off the center, and so they can only deploy in the far corners of the map you see there in front of you. What we see on the Aeldari side, Nick Nanavati is playing with a couple of fire prisms, which we know they can do almost a kind of a version of indirect with that. It can link fire. One fire prism can see it. They can link fire and Zot onto the other one, which is pretty strong. Also has a very impressive beam weapon. Or not, I shouldn't say beam weapon.
It's not really a beam weapon.
I shouldn't say beam weapon. It fires a blast of super hot energy across the table.
Eldari are,
Ich bin auf die Fire Prisms echt gespannt. Wie gesagt, mein Fire Prism ist unterwegs. Meine 3.
A lot of tanks, like the guard tanks as standard, tend to be like toughness 10, sometimes higher. And Eldari are more like a toughness 7 to 9 kind of an army on their vehicles. So their grav tanks, which are sort of their heaviest models, they have only toughness 9. Whereas like their lighter vehicles, like the Vipers and the Warwalker, those are more of a toughness 7 type model. The support weapons are even lower.
I mean, they just got canopies in front of the rider. I mean, come on.
But, like armor, crystal glass.
Die haben gerade erzählt, also die Fahrzeuge der Eldar sind Widerstand 9, die Fahrzeuge der Guards sind eher Widerstand 10 und diese leichten Fahrzeuge der Eldar wie die Vipers, die sind Toughness 7.
They have linked fire, which used to be a stratagem, and this is a perfect case of, a codex had an entire part of their page taken up with a stratagem that could only be used on one unit once per turn. Which is kind of a, that's part of the rules bloat that folks talked about. Is it's like the front matter.
Wir reden jetzt ein bisschen über das Linked Fire der Fire Prisms und wie das funktioniert und dass das früher ein Stratagem war.
Not for their blasty version of their shot, but for their direct shot. That's the 2-shot, damage 6, AP 4, strength 18, like real anti-tank shot that they have. They can fire off each other as long as they can see each other. So you could put one of those fire prisms out instead of exposing 2 fragile tanks.
And they've got decent movement too, so you can fire, throw one out.
They're Aeldari. But that way you're not exposing 2. We have the handshake. The game is getting ready to start.
Aber wer fängt an?
And
I think that's before Andrew is going for his die. They're going to see who gets to go first right now. Let's see if we can spot the roll. A 1 versus a 1. The rivalry is one of those.
Game tonight, a 1 right off the bat, and we're so excited thinking with a 1 that they were going to automatically.
Guard fängt an.
Of course, it's worked out just like today. Whoever wins this roll is going to go first, and so they are.
Also das bleibt auch gleich. Wir sehen es ja schon.
Try again, I suppose, here with the roll to go first, or was it?
I think that was a roll for pregame movement.
Pregame. Oh, Steve, we got to do the pregame movement. Okay.
So both of them have units that can do things like scouting. Nick has a Warwalker. The Warwalker has effectively a scout move and is very much mirrored by the way the Scout Sentinels work as well. So we've got
die Scout Sentinels haben jetzt die Scout Rule, das heißt, wir dürfen eine Bewegung machen. Das hat sich auf jeden Fall schon mal angezeigt. Und er darf jetzt die erste Einheit bewegen.
And thank you. Yeah, we will reset the secondary and primary scores on the scoreboard. Thank you for pointing that out in the chat. I don't want anybody starting out with a unfair advantage.
And someone has observed that the terrain seems open. It's quite open in the middle, but you'll notice those acrylics are actually all
We got a question about the acrylics too, so we should talk about that, about the footprint of the terrain and what it confers to the play experience.
We'll take a look at that Scout Sentinel in a second. Oh, wait, we're going to look at the Warlock now. Let's take a look at the Scout Sentinel.
No, we're looking at the terrain right now.
Pull that Warlock right out of here, just to get people right at the edge. The important thing to mention is the Ruins rules work very much like Obscuring rules work today. And so what we have right here is these ruin areas all completely block on a sight through them. And if you're only partially into them, you can't see.
So wie es aussieht, arbeiten die tatsächlich jetzt wirklich mit den Acrylplatten. Also wie wir schon Gerüchte gehört haben, bauen die relativ große Bases. Man kann nicht durchsehen. Wenn man drin steht, kann man gesehen werden, außer es ist natürlich eine physische Wand dazwischen. Das wird also auf jeden Fall auch in der 10. Edition bleiben. Das heißt, diese Panzer da hinten sind relativ gut geblockt. Also es ist spannend, das ist sehr dicht das Gelände. Außer man bewegt sich halt in die Ruinen rein und man muss auf die Mitte laufen für diese Marker. Das ist ein sehr spannendes Layout. Und wir sehen auch hier die Ls.
Speaking of those units, now that we've gotten that explanation.
Hier sehen wir die Scout Sentinels. 10 Zoll Bewegung, haben 2 Zoll Bewegung verloren. Scout 9 Zoll Base Move, also sie können sich 9 Zoll bewegen. Dann sehen wir hier die Autocannon, Stärke 9, minus 1,3, 2 Schuss, 4 plus BF, ist gut. Heavy Flamer bleibt Heavy Flamer, ist quasi identisch geblieben. Last Cannon, Whopping Strength 12. Plasma Cannon, Stärke 8, minus 3,2, ist also identisch geblieben. Ist ein Nerf. Weil hat natürlich Output verloren. Ist aber jetzt gut gegen Infanterie, schlecht gegen Fahrzeuge. Kann man so sagen. Dann haben sie Daring Raccoon, da brauche ich eine Sekunde, um das zu lesen. Oh, das ist gut. In 18 Zoll und sichtbar zu dieser Einheit, also zu diesen Scout Sentinels, kannst du eine Astra Militarum Einheit wählen. Oder wenn du eine Einheit hast, kannst du eine gegnerische Einheit wählen. Wenn die Astra Militarum Einheit dagegen Attacken durchführt, kannst du Hitrolls von 1 wiederholen. Und wenn sie die Indirect Fire Ability hat, kriegt sie nicht die Strafe dafür, dass sie ohne Sichtlinie schießt. Holy moly. Diese Scout Sentinels sind natürlich Whopping. 9 Zoll Pre-Game Move, 10 Zoll Base Move, damit kriegt man Sichtlinien. Du brauchst also gar nicht mehr die Waffen, die haben, weil die sind jetzt nur noch Spotter für dich. Die spotten für deine Artillerie. Deine Artillerie schießt mit Reroll 1 to Hit indirekt, ohne Abzüge auf den Gegner. Sehr stark. Sehr stark. Ist natürlich ein bisschen traurig, weil indirektes Feuer ist nicht so geil für eine Meta, aber die Guard-Spieler werden sich freuen. Toughness 7, haben also nochmal Toughness dazu bekommen, 3er Safe bekommen, vorher hatten sie einen 4er Safe. Das heißt, die zu entfernen wird auch noch richtig schwierig.
Of course, they still got a Sentinel Chainsaw, which is still my favorite thing in all of Warhammer. I'm a classic Catachan player.
When I built, same here. When I built my Sentinels, like, do I attach this chainsaw? Yeah, gotta break out the chainsaws.
Absolutely gonna stick those chainsaws.
Okay, I want to know in the chat. In chat, has anyone ever connected with a Hunter Killer missile? Anyone ever? I want to know. Have you ever hit with a Hunter Killer missile?
I'm not in the chat, so I can't answer this question.
We all know the answer is no.
Chat fragt, ob jemals jemand mit der Hunter Killer Missile getroffen hat. Wir sehen jetzt hier übrigens links an der Vatis Fate Dice. 2 Sechsen, 2 Fünfen, 2 Vieren, 2 Dreien, eine 2, eine 1 und 2 Einsen und sowieso. Ja, Fate Dice. Und anscheinend hat er einen Mulligan genommen, weil er hat nur noch 11 Würfel. Das heißt, der erste Wurf war auf jeden Fall nicht geil.
And basically, they roll 12 dice. That's their fate dice pool for the game. And there's some ways that you can get more of them, but there's some downsides to those. We'll talk about.
Change them up too. Yeah, hopefully
we'll talk about that over the course of play. There's some enhancements we're going to see in next.
Hier seht ihr auch die Regel für die Fate Dice. Sehr coole Sache an
Basically, you
sich.
can replace a roll before rolling. You can roll
Wie
a dice,
funktioniert
see what
das?
happened, and then use it.
Es funktioniert
And
so,
it's
dass ihr
gonna use whatever
quasi
the dice
diese
result was
12
before
Würfel,
as a
diese
replacement there.
Ergebnisse dürft ihr
Varsity,
dann, also
you
ihr
can
würfelt
have those
quasi
dice work as well once
1,
per turn.
wie wir es da jetzt haben,
And
2
effectively
6,
it
2
gives you a
5,
pool of
2 4, 2
reliability.
3, 2 2,
Fate
2
dice are a
1.
good mechanic, they're a cool
Und dann
mechanic,
dürft
they're a
ihr
mechanic.
für diese Liste, die ihr da unten seht,
They're very,
Advanced,
very
Battle Shock,
powerful
Charge,
because
Damage, Hit,
the
Saving
temptation
oder
can
Wound
be to
Roll,
blow your
dürft
fate dice
ihr
roll.
einen
You get
Würfel
top
ersetzen.
opportunity.
Use them early and often. You don't know. We're not
Also ihr
guaranteed
könnt
any
quasi
assurances
I
on
will
eine
the
1
tell
guarantee
legen,
you,
wenn ihr
I
sie
played
wollt.
a game with them
Ist
myself
jetzt immer die
against
Frage, ob man das
astronauts.
möchte, aber ihr könnt zum Beispiel auch sagen,
Actually,
okay,
it's one of the more
dieser
fun
Würfel,
matchups in the
dieser
game.
Advanced
You get to
Roll
go around
ist
against each
jetzt
other,
eine
and saving a couple of
6.
fate dice for the end of the game won me that game. So it's always a debate. Do you use them early? Or do you
Eine
save
starke
them for that
Ability,
key
vor allem hast du halt
save
alle
or something else?
im Laufe des Spiels. Die Frage ist halt, du musst jetzt die Ressourcen ein bisschen haushalten, die füllen sich nicht wieder auf.
And discipline's important. This is the Asuriani. They're not Drukari. They're not all about pleasure and pain. They are all about making the right calls at the right time based upon their knowledge of the
Seeing
future.
the strands of fate.
Finding their fate, in fact. So, we've seen fate dice. We've seen how Scout Sentinels work. We'll take a look at the Warwalker as well, too. Nick's only got one of those Warwalkers in this list, but it also had Scout. And so, we can take a look at this battlefield and we can see a couple of things going on.
Warwalker is an iconic unit. It's been, you know, since the very origin, I think, of the Aeldari.
Absolutely. And we're going to take a look at the
Warwalker that we've got.
Oh,
we are getting some updates from what's
apparently
happening
we've
at
been
the
getting
table,
some
too.
updates. And I'm just looking for where those updates are coming in from.
Oh, we're going to get some. You know, check in our team chat.
All right. So what we do know is that Andrew did get an extra command point because of Lord Solar in his list.
So he's going to have an extra CP every battle round because he has the Lord Commander.
Every battle round?
Oh, ist das
so
stark.
at the start of every turn.
Every battle round, not every turn.
Yeah, so well, at the start of every turn, players generate a command point each. Something you and your opponents do. So you're saying on his turn he's going to generate an extra one?
Yes.
That's
so
good.
It's exactly
Oh,
what's
ist
gonna
das
happen
gut.
is,
Lord Solar
every
Neontus gibt dir
turn that
straight up
Andrew has,
einen
he's gonna
Command
get
Point mehr
2
pro Battle
CP
Round.
instead of 1 for the turn because he has that Lord Commander. It's important to note, though, one of the things we've been hearing and watching sort of in the pundit sphere, as it were, of Warhammer is a lot of folks going, man, you know, things like Farseers are a good example. So I'll use Farseers and Lord Leontus at the same time. Now, Lord Leontus is a pretty durable model, and we'll take a look at his data sheet soon. We're going to hold off and keep the T's going for Leontus. But ultimately, he's a leader. He does not have the lone operative rules, so if you can see him, or if you have an interacting can see him, you can shoot him.
He's standing on some tactical terrain.
He is definitely standing on a tactical rock. Now, he can join one of these guard squads, and he has done so. So he has basically a 20-model squad around him, plus a platoon command squad attached. Remember what we said? That squad can have 2 leaders attached if one of them is a platoon command squad, so it's got 26 models in the unit in total.
Okay, jetzt haben sie es gerade bestätigt. Du kannst 20 Guardsmen spielen, du kannst einen 5-Mann Command Squad anschließen und du kannst noch einen Offizier anschließen. 26 Modelle Trupps.
With leaders using Lookout Sir and basically giving auras to groups of units around them. Leaders are quite durable because you can basically protect them from being shot for a very long time. That is not really the case anymore because while they are surrounded by those zealous Death Corps veterans, and as soon as those Death Corps die, they have a chance for a couple of them to come back each turn. Once they're gone, and Leontus is on his own, and then he can be shot. So while he does provide that really powerful benefit of a command point every single your turn, he's also a model that once his cover is gone, as it were, once his buddies are gone, he's just another model on the battlefield.
Yeah, when we bring up his data slate, see what all different things he can join, you know, but, you know, Guard are not known necessarily for
Oh,
their
sie zeigen uns
toughness.
auf jeden Fall noch Leontus.
Absolutely
Das ist richtig
not.
cool. Leontus ist ein Leader, kann sich also
Neither
einem
are
Trupp
the Aeldari.
anschließen.
So the Guard
Das
have
heißt,
the
du hast
advantage
jetzt
here
quasi diesen
because they
20-Mann-Trupp mit dem Command Squad,
the
also
armor
diesen
of the Guard.
25-Mann-Trupp
And
und
one of the things
Leontus.
that Andrew has used quite a few of in this battle, and I think he has a couple of them in reserves as well, are the adorable, the wonderful, the magical, the beautiful Taurox. And I think it's about time we take a look at that Taurox data sheet. I know we might have peeked at it earlier. But it's going to be an important part of Andrew's game plan, how the Taurox...
Oh, we did actually look at the Taurox earlier, that is for sure.
Well, let's take another look at it for folks who aren't
anybody that's
trolling
joined us.
Reddit or watching the stream all day.
If you were watching earlier, we will definitely be looking at some of the same things we did earlier, but we'll also get some new stuff, so hang tight.
And I think they're still exciting, frankly. I've been looking at these things for a while now.
Anybody staying up late to watch this? It is almost 8 p.m.
I
Central
So, jetzt
actually
sehen wir
Time.
den
some of
Taurox.
the folks I saw when I was overseas.
Toughness 10, nee, Toughness 8, leichtes Fahrzeug.
They were, so if you guys are watching late and
Twin
we were
Autocannon,
talking earlier, I
Stormbolter,
appreciate you. I hope
Twin Linked.
you are
sehr cool. Armor Tracks, bisschen Nahkampf.
Game Changers. 2
Ähm,
a.m. in the UK. I'm glad I also got
Kannst du
your
nach dem
punch card
Advancen
filled up
aussteigen?
a little bit earlier with
Finde
We
ich
have
schick.
someone from Norway who's watching as well.
Kannst dich chargen, aber du kannst
Absolutely fantastic. So we will keep this exciting all night long, trying to do our best to be a verbal
kannst
coffee
normal
to your
schießen.
experience here
Das ist
tableside.
stark. So hast
And
du
why
einmal
don't we
extra
take a look at
Bewegung.
Torox to keep that going. So they're very
Kannst 12
quick.
Astra
So the
Militarum
important
Modelle
thing about
transportieren.
Torox is
Ogrins sind
not only
3.
can you disembark
Heavy
after
Weapon
moving,
Squad sind
you can
2.
transport now, which is a new thing again. Bit of a harkening back to older editions in some ways.
Ja,
Hey,
ist
hey,
jetzt ein
Solo Paint
solides,
back, Tank Shocks back.
solides Rhino-Chassis, würde ich mal
Deep
sagen.
Strikes
3er
back.
Rüstung, 7er Leadership, OC2.
Oh yeah.
Haut mich jetzt, Verzeihung, haut mich jetzt nicht aus den Socken. Hätte ich Chimären lieber gesehen, weil die haben irgendwie auch noch Waffenplattformen, glaube ich.
Which was fascinating.
We will actually. You're right. We actually did kind of skip over. Glaze ever talked about the Warwalkers data sheet. We will bring it up.
Are they
shortly
pointing out
after
like
this.
what happened to my Warwalker?
Oh no. We talked. We were going to bring it up. We brought up the Scout Sentinel.
I love teasing
we'll bring
everyone.
up the
With, like,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
we'll see it. Maybe we won't. It was up there briefly. So if you were ready with your screenshotting, I
Nick
suppose.
verwendet hier schon seine Abilities für 6 to Saves.
Twin autocannon. Twin linked is a new rule keyword for weapons that lets them reroll
Hat man auch
2
gesehen, dass
wounds.
der Farseer einen drehen darf. Also kann er quasi eine 1 pro Turn in eine 6 drehen. Starke Fähigkeit. Sorgt dafür, dass der Farseer relativ zentral in der Armee drin steht.
The autocannon, as I said, is awesome to see. The fact that it's essentially, with the adjustment of toughness and then maybe the adjustment of some of the strength on some of the weapons, how those weapon profiles fit into the ecosystem of what we're going to see on the table and what people ultimately end up taking.
Exactly. Now, I think we've got both an Overwatch happening here and the use of Fate dice. Although I saw a note
Das
there
könnte
from
natürlich
Falcon,
auch
but I don't
Overwatch
think Nick
gewesen
has
sein.
any Falcons in his list, so it's probably not a Falcon.
He has a Wave Serpent and
2 Fire Prisms.
And 2 Fire
so
Prisms.
it was a Fire Prism that might have been doing the Overwatch or something similar. Let me take a quick look here at this update. And Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how the Torox works?
I love the Falcons. I did, by the way. So look at the Falcons. I remember painting my first Falcon. This is one of the things that the new edition brings. Is just the magic of getting different things on the table, stuff from your collection. I can't wait. But as far as the Torox went, the advance and be able to deposit troops onto objectives is going to be huge. And then a little bit of fire support. The firepower.
Jetzt sehen wir hier ein bisschen mehr. Da unten sehen wir Redlings. Wir sehen da Ranger, Warp Spiders, den Warwalker. Eine Einheit im Wave Serpent, wahrscheinlich Die Avengers. 2 Units Warp Spiders. Die müssen so gut sein, dass man 2 Warp Spiders spielen kann.
Are going to be deploy, teleport, homers, and secure no man's land. So, one of the things about tactical objectives is at the start of your command phase, you're going to draw your hand up to 2. If you have some already from a prior turn, you're going to keep those. But
so, die Redlings bewegen sich. Was ist da runtergekommen? Das sieht nach Sions aus.
We saw more of them because there was a mission special rule that they had drawn and added to the game and play that caused them to draw 3 at a time. So, what's happening right now is they have Andrew has drawn 2. Now, Nick doesn't know what his are yet because
der Tauros hat sich nach vorne bewegt und die steigen aus.
Only 2 objectives in play. Andrew doesn't know what Nick's might be when his turn comes, and Nick doesn't know what his might be while he's reacting to Andrew's turn. As we get these things sized up and on the screen, you're going to notice that we've got Secure No Man's Land, which is basically challenging Andrew to hold a majority of the objectives in No Man's Land. So
that kind of works out because he plans on heading there anyway.
He does. So he needs to grab 2 of those objectives. There's 3 of them in No Man's Land.
Hier sehen wir weitere Secondaries. Deploy Teleporter haben wir noch nicht gesehen. Secure No Man's Land haben wir im ersten Spiel schon gesehen. Sehr starkes Secondary. 5 Punkte straight up.
That is an icon that indicates this could be used as a fixed objective.
Wir sehen jetzt gerade, dass sie da sagen, Deploy Teleportomas. Seht ihr vielleicht unten rechts hat dieses kleine Datenblatt. Das heißt, du kannst das als festes Secondary auswählen, während du Secure No Man's Land als nicht festes Secondary nehmen kannst.
Exactly. So we're seeing the case of one that could be done as fixed being drawn instead as tactical, in which case it earns an extra VP if it's completed as a tactical, because you only have 1 turn in which to do it. So what we've got going on here
Teleport-Homers funktioniert so. Du kriegst eine Einheit, wenn die nicht schießt. Und in 6 Zoll von der Mitte ist vollständig. Nee, nur within. Dann kriegst du 3 Punkte, wenn du die Karte ziehst. Wenn du in der gegnerischen Aufstellungszone bist, kriegst du 4 Punkte.
That's a big ask in turn 1. Of course, there are probably some things that could do it. I don't think they're represented here in this list. He's going to get over there in his deployment zone with some shells. I think we're going to see an electrifying shooting phase.
And the Scout Sentinels look like they've tried to get there. I don't know if they've quite made it. We'll find out when the scoring time comes or whether or not someone can check it. I don't think they're quite there.
That might be right on the edge.
It's right on the edge, and it is within. It's not wholly within in order to do the teleport. So if one of those Sentinels is touching more than 9 inches away from that objective, maybe we can get a measurement from the table boss to find out if it's all the way.
If we go back to the overhead view there, if that objective is placed directly in the center of the table, that is probably...
Looks like it's a little short still. We'll find out. Maybe we'll get a measurement at some point during play.
I think that's close.
Suffice to say, he's going to get a couple of points from that. So that's one of his tactics.
Sieht stark nach 5 Punkten aus. 10 Punkte, direkt erste Runde, 2 gute Secondary-Karten gezogen. Ich hasse es.
So he's got both objectives in no man's
Aber was soll man machen? Und jetzt fängt der indirekte Beschuss an. Wir sehen, glaube ich, jetzt hier Würfel, Stratagems benutzen auf Troops und du kannst dann recyceln.
Slower armies might choose fixed more often, faster armies may choose tactical more often. It's quite balanced.
Well, looking at once you start to get comfortable with what your army is capable of, and you
or
what your opponent's army is capable of, it's going to influence your decisions.
And we probably, Warner, should take off the score from the prior games that happened today on the right side of that screen. We'll get it updated with the new. Oh, there we go. We got the updated one on there now.
A lot of buttons to press.
A lot of buttons to press.
Button pressers.
Warner, he is crushing it though all weekend long. We're going to hear more from Warner tonight as he weighs.
So, ich hole mir mal ganz schnell was zu trinken. Das ist hier mal noch in der Bewegungsphase.
Warhammer 40,000. So he actually knows more about the new edition than most people would ever let on. So Warner, what are you thinking so far about what's happening in this game?
All kinds of arcane knowledge in my memory banks.
Arcane.
Man of many talents. Mystery International.
Going to be exciting. So a couple of things have happened. First of all, because that Sentinel ran over there in this area near some Rangers, so Nick has some Rangers, and they have a couple of interesting rules. And why don't we take a look at the Ranger data sheet, and we'll talk about
we got to look at the Warwalker first. We
promised
the
Warwalker. All right, we
can definitely talk about Rangers and precision shots. Yeah. They can shoot.
All right. So
der Warwalker, perfektes Timing, wieder zurückzukommen.
Strands of Fate. That is the Fate dice functionality.
Hier sehen wir die richtig geile Brightlands mit Stärke 12, minus 3, W6 plus 2, Scout 9 Zoll, minus 1 to Wound, 4er Retter. Jungs! Das ist schick.
Minus 1 to Wound, 4 up Invul, they get a 3 up save. It's a pretty durable model, and of course it has Warwalker feet, which are adorable, and it has 2 weapons. In this case, he's fielding Bright Lances on his Warwalker, so it's a double
Bright Lens ist der Weg.
Quite a cute, durable little thing. Of course, once the damage actually does go through, they only have 6 wounds, so they're only going to last but so long. But it's an interesting contrast with Scout Sentinels in that it is not quite as many wounds, but it has certainly an advantage in arcane science, kind of like the arcane knowledge of Tech Priest.
Der Warwalker gefällt mir.
Richtig gut. The invulnerable save on the Warwalker cannot be understated here, and the fact that you can equip it with a variety of weapon options that can really plug into whatever you think the quote-unquote meta might be in your area.
And, of course, it interacts really interestingly with Fate Dice as well, because you might think to use your Fate Dice offensively, but if you have a few of those 4s, you find yourself in a situation where if someone almost gets that thing down and they're near the end of their shooting phase, you might choose to burn Fate Dice just to keep the model annoyingly alive.
And that could be because it's on an objective, or you still just want it on the table for its weapon platforms, capability.
Toughness 7 minus 1 to Wound ist richtig
so we'll
gut,
take
Jungs.
that Warwalker data sheet down, we'll take a look at the battlefield, and we're going to show you Rangers later, but we're going to hold off for now. But we will tell you that one of the cool
Leandros ist übrigens tatsächlich Teil dieser großen Einheit da oben. Das macht ihn natürlich ein bisschen schlechter.
On this side of the wall to start the game, they started here, but this Scout Sentinel got close to it, and even though it's Andrew's turn, the Rangers moved through the wall. So one of the things that Rangers have is they have the ability to move d6 inches if an enemy unit ends a move within 9 inches of them in the enemy's movement phase. They're sort of a shoot and scarper bit of a model, and we'll talk more about that later because Andrew also has the classic shoot, sharp, and scarper models of the Ratlings.
The Ratlings,
in his list. So we'll see some adorable Ratlings later in the game as well.
Die Ranger können sich anscheinend bewegen, wenn man sich in Distanz von ihnen reinbewegt.
Secondary points here for his turn. He also moved his Scout Sentinels here, and he got Overwatched.
We can bring up the Overwatch stratagem. That's one of the, of course, it's something
by this Wave Serpent. So it shot. Oh, we're gonna make a little like classic, battle report blasty symbol there. My poor drawing.
That's super epic.
Is. Wonderful.
Very descriptive.
Destroyed one of those Scout Sentinels with his Overwatch. And how did he destroy one of those Scout Sentinels with the Overwatch? Well, Fate Dice interact really interestingly with Overwatch. So there's a Bright Lance, a Twin Link Bright Lance on that Wave Serpent. and he made sure to hit one of those Sentinels. Sentinel failed its save, although
because
it
is neg 4 AP.
That's neg 3.
The Bright Lance. Yeah, neg 3. Yep.
So he would have gotten a save, but he didn't quite make it. And of course, he can use Fate Dice as well to get that 7 damage.
Starke Fähigkeit. Hier sieht man es wieder. Richtig starke Fähigkeit. Overwatch mit der Wave-Stoppen gegeben, ein Sentinel einfach erschossen mit Fate Dice.
Pretty good. Anytime you can get those out of phase movement or out of phase actions on your opponent can be very devastating.
Devastating indeed, although we're not talking about devastating anything.
I know, I got to change my whole vocabulary.
Yeah, devastating has
catastrophic.
A whole new
Catastrophic
and intimation.
Is what we're going for, yep.
Well, we'll talk about devastating soon, but we'll wait till we get to Nick's turn because he's got a little bit of devastation hiding behind those walls himself to come into play later in this game.
Love this positioning phase right now as Andrew is just trying to get up there, cause a little bit of pressure, be near the objectives, which looks like he's successfully done, and also make Nick make some choices when it comes around to his turn about what he focuses on.
Ich denke, wir sind in der Schussphase angekommen.
Be in his face, or does he, focus on the scoreboard?
Absolutely. So it looks like we had some shooting going on against some Rangers in various parts of the board. Those Rangers moved up and moved out, but they are getting shot by the infantry squads that are out on the board. We noticed that Andrew took his Turox and moved it over from its starting position. He may have rolled an advance roll as well. As we know, they can advance and then still disembark. And he got this Death Core out, kind of hiding behind the obscuring of this ruin and helping deal with those Rangers that were sitting there over behind.
Ich würde so gerne das Ranger-Datasheet sehen.
I mean, it's just the awareness of the Death Core to decide when they're going to die for the Emperor as opposed to simply arbitrarily dying for the Emperor. This is the nature of how they function. They're okay with it either way, but they want to die well.
Fair enough. Yep. Legendary.
Moments away from whipping out those shovels. Now, there's some really scary things in the Aeldari army. So Andrew's moved forward. He's grabbed some board control. He's definitely going to start moving those
objectives. Ich bin hart gespannt, was die Fire Prisons machen. Die werden wahrscheinlich einfach die Sentinels aufrauchen.
But you score those tactical objectives at the end of your turn, and it's still the case in the rules that the person whose turn it is decides when simultaneous acts, abilities, etc. occur. So the person playing the tactical objectives can choose to score them at the end of the turn, and then move the servo skulls that he controls so that he doesn't move them out of scoring capability. I suppose you could choose to move them first, but then lose your tactical objectives, and that would be a little
I don't know
bit
that you
silly
do
to
that. I guess it could be things that you maybe want to do, depending on what, maybe where you're going. You want to make sure it gets to where you're going.
Absolutely.
Also die Primärmission, wer sie vorher nicht mitgekriegt hat, deploy Servo Skulls, du hast die 3 Marker in der Mitte und du kannst sie am Ende deines Zuges bewegen, wenn du sie kontrollierst. Und wenn die innerhalb von 12 Zoll von der gegnerischen Aufstellungszone sind, kriegst du 2 Punkte. Wenn du innerhalb von 9 bist, oder innerhalb von 6 bist, kriegst du 3 Punkte. Und wenn du in der Aufstellungszone bist, kriegst du 5 Punkte pro Marker, den du kontrollierst. Und du scorest am Ende deines Zuges. Das heißt, das wird ein schönes Hin und Her zwischen den einzelnen Einheiten. Was mir hier auch auffällt, ist, wir spielen 2000 Punkte und wir haben irgendwie 4 Panzer, 2 Transporter und nur 3 oder 4 Infanterietrupps auf der Guard-Seite plus die Sentinels. Also die Armee ist ungefähr so groß, wie man eine Guard-Armee jetzt auch erwarten würde.
I agree. Yay, Warhammer. Also a comment in the chat. Let's bring up the Rangers too.
The last cannon has come through and done 3 damage.
After we see what's happening with this.
His Wave Serpent, it looks like his Wave Serpent started to take some damage. He may only have 3 wounds left. And usually good players will count down so their opponent doesn't have to memorize their wound pools and do math in their head all the time.
As long as they're not Paul.
As long as they're not. Count up Paul.
Okay, look, old habits.
Paul, come. You need to be a polite gentleman,
I have stressed that the rules stipulate you should count down.
Also was wir jetzt auch sehen, ist der Scout Sentinel, der schießt. Indirekter Beschuss höchstwahrscheinlich. Wenn die Scout Sentinels etwas sehen, dann kannst du mit der Artillerie darauf schießen, ohne Abzüge zu kriegen.
Brian, with you. Yes, I agree.
All right, so
still not happening.
Once again, looking at the tactical objectives, we know that those tactical objectives have been scored most likely, and then once Andrew's turn is over, we're going to start moving. These are the Fate Dice?
I think that is the Fate Dice.
Are these the only Fate Dice he has left?
He has already used some. He used some for that Overwatch.
He's already used 5 of his 7.
He did a reroll, so he lost 1 there, I think.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So, Nick is burning his Fate Dice very quickly.
Look,
ziemlich schnell durchgebrannt.
With the fact is, if you got them, you use them right when you need them. You might regret it later. That is, of course, a strategy, though. It's a style. Almost.
It is. And it's an interesting thing because remember, his Farseer can change once per turn one of those fate dice into a 6. And so even though he's got a 1 and a 2, those are actually quite useful because they are future 6s, if you will, as long as he uses them when he's in range of his
And if he still got him when he
he still has them when the time comes. Now I have a question. I can't quite see everything on the board. Is the Wind Rider squad that Nick has in reserve, or is it deployed on the board?
Our ticker sometimes hides things. I'm not seeing them on the table right now, though.
Ich glaube, der Windrider-Trupp, von dem Sie gerade reden, ist in der linken unteren
Oh,
Ruine.
that
They're
must be
underneath
them
that building,
under
actually,
the,
on
Right under there?
There
Yeah,
we go.
that's
All
what
right,
I'm
so
saying.
Nick has kind of a powerful weapon in his Wind Rider squad. It's a complex unit. And it shows some of the interaction of how Warlocks and Farseers can work together in a unit.
Is that what you're referring to with the complex units? The fact that
Yes.
there are two attached
Two
characters
attached
to
characters.
that unit, and they both provide two separate sets of enhancements.
And you guys will find there's a
buffs.
brilliant, absolutely brilliant designer's commentary that'll come up out alongside the edition. That designer's commentary covers in detail, actually excruciating detail, every possible curiosity or fringe case in the rules that people might run into, which I think the community as a whole will benefit from greatly. One of the things it also mentions is just in case someone finds something creative that somehow got missed, you can never have more than 2 leaders attached to one squad. And you'll find that the rules themselves naturally cover that. Never more than 2, and always the 2 are quite controlled. Because we want to make sure we don't get to that sort of 7th edition Death Star of Doom situation that once existed when characters could attach a bit more willy-nilly
I miss my super friends.
than is the case now. So,
my Iron Hands miss
oh,
the days.
gosh.
My goodness.
I'll never forget the
Different times then.
interesting
Okay.
times of 7th edition. I watched a knight surf on a piece of terrain thrown
Ah,
by a
das
librarian that
tut
crossed
schon
it.
weh, das anzuschauen.
Upon it landed,
Wie jetzt einfach Sachen
walked off the train,
einfach ohne
charged
Sichtlinie.
one tech
Der
priest
Guardspieler
born
macht
of
einfach nichts und der Elder nimmt einfach Modelle vom Tisch. Das ist so traurig.
But let's talk about
Indirekter
the
Beschuss.
now, although I love
I'm
reflecting
feeling
on
nostalgic.
yesteryear.
It's
No,
just
I love it, I absolutely do, because in the I said with the fact because we're bringing all that forward. All that stuff is actually like the theme and the stuff that you want to see on units is making it forward. The models we have in our collection from then, we might get a chance to bring it back out again. Then maybe if we haven't seen them competitively in a little while, I'm excited.
Yep. So one of the things that Nick has is he has 2 support weapons in his army. They provide him indirect. He's using the Shadow Weaver, which is a really powerful weapon. We'll show that later on. But Andrew, wisely, recognizing that he has an advantage in indirect fire with his 2 Wyverns and his 2 Basilisks. Of course, we'll get to all these data sheets over the next few hours.
We do need to bring up the Ranger data slate while they're still on the table.
Well, why don't we focus right now? Yes, we'll bring the Rangers up shortly, and here they are. So in the meantime, one of the things that has happened is this Sentinel over here was able to get an angled shot down the field at one of Nick's hidden support weapons, and in so doing was able to land some good shots on it and get rid of one of those things before they started dealing trouble across the battlefield.
That is pretty good.
Andrew's attempting to clear Nick's indirect fire out so that he has one advantage as the game goes on against those Fate dice and those high-powered Aeldari weaponry. So, one of the things that's a problem for Nick
That's a
having
video
gone
ranger.
second as well is that the Basilisks and the Wyverns are shooting at one of his units, his Wind Rider unit. So he has 6
Precision
Wind Riders.
Heavy,
They're quick scatter lasers. It's a very
4 minus
shooty
1, 2
unit.
Schaden.
They're
2
joined by
Schaden
2
ist
characters,
gut.
and Nick is attempting to get rid of a few of those.
7
So he
Bewegungen,
can come down to some
5er
of his saves,
Save,
get the benefit of cover and other things against
5er
them. So
Retter.
now this
5er Retter ist
goes
auch
just
schick.
rolling indirect fire against those Wind Riders,
Path of
which
the
is a big
Outcast.
chance
Wenn
to
sich die
start
gegnerische Einheit in 9
firing
Zoll
units
bewegt
all the time.
und du nicht in Engagement Range bist, kannst du eine normale Bewegung von
Yep, so you
W6
noticed that the Rangers
durchführen.
moved in response to the Sentinels getting near them. That was helpful potentially. They do have a nice little invulnerable save that's a reflection of how stealthy and difficult they are, and it only works against ranged attacks. Once you get close and personal, that camo cloak is not quite as valuable as it might otherwise be, and those Rangers lose that 5-up invulnerable, but they're quite tough to shoot out of cover from a distance. They've got, of course, the benefit of cover itself, but I also got that invulnerable
Was wir
save.
hier auch sehen,
Additionally,
was mir als
they have
erstes in den
stealth,
Sinn kommt,
so they're -1 to
sie
hit.
sind kein Battleline mehr.
Good range.
Stealth, and I also want to talk about that precision with the damage to weapons.
Und die Netze und
Yeah, yes,
Ausrüstungsgegenstände, die
precision
man
is
hat,
a rule that's been added to
machen
the
keinen
game.
Unterschied mehr.
That's quite the underlying job, Mike. Great job. And it looks like I'm scratching out the other weapon. I'm not trying to belittle the other weapon, but look, the focus of the Ranger is the Ranger long rifle, after all. So, as we look at it, we'll notice that it's heavy, and heavy works a little differently. One of the things I know the design studio was thinking about when they were doing weapon design was, traditionally heavy would be one of those rules that many units ignored the downside of. You know, so you make a rule and then you make a bunch of units ignore it, like vehicles.
Vehicles, or they've got a chapter trait, or some
Yes,
strategy
and
we can use.
effectively, it was a penalty, right? Like the design of heavy was you lose accuracy if you
Precision
move,
is
as opposed
cool.
to you gain something if you don't move. And
Auch die
they
Ranger
flipped it a little
Long
bit so that
Rifle.
It's more of an actual benefit to have heavy on your weapon instead of something.
Gerade mit den
you wish
ganzen
you
kleinen
didn't have.
Charakteren finde ich das eine
Because if
coole
you sit
Sache.
still, the nature of the weapon forces you to really focus in. It gets more accurate. You add to their ballistic skill when you don't
Calm your
move.
breathing.
Absolutely. calm your breathing. Yeah, so, you probably know more about that than me. I can't shut up sometimes.
Oh no, I
Paul.
meant
Breathing.
with the holding the heavy weapon, like what you would do if you were. I've seen movies where this happens.
You're just like steady. So, precision is also an important rule. It lets you pick out characters and attached units. It does not let you see very difficult to see things you wouldn't otherwise see, but it means when you see an actual target, you're taking your time to pick out specific targets instead of just firing your weapon at them. And so, those Rangers are really kind of glowed up in terms of how that weapon works. They don't have devastating wounds
Ich glaube, man
effectively,
sieht
which is what they
sie.
used to
Ich
have.
weiß nicht, ob man
really, where
viele
they roll
davon
a
sieht, aber ich
6-inch
glaube,
portal.
allein
Instead,
weil
it's a
sie
flat 2 damage
Infiltrators haben,
weapon
wird man
that
sie
has
noch
81.
sehen.
It's quite
Stealth ist
effective.
auch ganz gut.
And
That's big.
Stealth minus 1 Straight gegen Range
wound
Attacks.
rates or wound counts have been kind of adjusted, of course, as you might expect from a new edition of the game. That damage too, though, from basically basic troops.
Okay. So a couple of bikes have died from the Basilisk firing at them. So there's some bikes left, but not all the bikes left. And then simultaneously, there's some shooting going on from the Wyverns into the Scorpion unit.
Ich glaube, das Spiel wird gar nicht so lange gehen.
Which where's that Scorpion unit at in the battlefield there? Tech Priest Warner or Calvin will give us an update. These models are hidden underneath some of this terrain, which is important. So Scorpions are another unit. We have so many Aeldari units to talk about in this army. I don't even know where to start.
I am excited.
In
We
some
got War
cases.
Spiders, Striking Scorpions. We got support platforms.
We have a whole game to talk about.
Wave
We're not
Serpents.
gonna blow all of them in the first turn. We need to make sure we tell the story as it happens. Suffice to say, there's some Eldar that are taking some indirect fire right now, and that'll have impacts later in the game.
I believe we showed the Wyvern data slate earlier. We have not showed the Basilisk.
Da ist Karandras dabei.
Look at that
Well,
Sentinel.
let's hold off on data sheets for a while. And let's just take a look at how this turn is going. And that Sentinel definitely is taking a look at, well, some Scorpions. Tech Priest Warner, Johnny on the spot. The ace got across the table to that angled camera and immediately put those things in stark relief for
a
us to see.
plasma cannon. And Warp Spiders.
And Karandras is a very devastating model. As
Ich bin so gespannt,
Scorpions base.
was die Jungs und was die Mädels an Scorpions und Karandras und die ganzen Phönixkönige machen.
Meantime, by the way, I almost want to go back to that view to take a look at the brilliant paint work of Andrew and his Scout Sentinel. You know, as mentioned, these are two heralded tournament players, but also you got brilliant chipping and weathering and all sorts of other stuff on this. And that's
Genau.
Hallmark
Und dann
of
hast
these
du,
players
jetzt
that
erzählen sie gerade, wie schön der Sentinel ist und wie bemalt er ist. Und im rechten Bild sehen wir die Viper von Nick Nanavati,
Those 10 points aren't going to get themselves.
Really gonna have to work
die noch nicht
hard
mal
to get
battle
these
ready
battle
ist.
ready points. So let's go back to the overhead view, and we'll be closing on the end of the turn, but Andrew's still working with all that firepower before it starts getting picked up by the Aeldari. And we noticed that basically the Sentinels have moved up and shot. They've damaged that wave.
Ich bin hart gespannt, wie die Eldari...
There's a lot of
Also es ist gar nicht so viel gestorben, wie ich erwartet habe.
So rather than getting units removed,
Aber
is able to keep
ich
most
bin
of these
echt
units
gespannt,
intact,
wie
take some damage in the process.
die Artillerie noch der Hand hat.
There's some charges happening. Oh,
Some Sentinel saws.
Sentinel saws are going to work. Gosh, I love the chainsaw. When I first started playing Warhammer 40,000, I was a Catachin fan. I still am a Catachin fan. And there's just something magical about guys in t-shirts running at the horrors.
Stärke 3 Attacken, Stärke 6, minus 1, 1.
Punching them with their
Diese
knives
Sentinel
and their
Saws.
chainsaws and
I just
everything
like it. They have
else.
the same
Waffenskill
save
4.
as the guy in the flag vest. You know?
Ist ganz gut
Absolutely.
gegen
It's
so kleine
very
Elder-Modelle.
And so we're going to see what these chainsaws do. When we go back to that top-down view, we'll take a look at where some of these charges are occurring. And charging has changed, Paul. Do you want to talk a little bit about how charges have changed in the new edition?
Charging has changed in the new edition. Well, you roll 2d6.
Dude, that's almost the same as it is today.
But what you have to do is you have to move into base contact if possible.
You do have to move to base contact if possible. You
Yep.
still have to end up engaged. So I see what Andrew has done here. So Andrew has found a mistake in Nick's game plan.
Do tell.
Well, we're going to show you the Warp Spider data sheets eventually. But Warp Spiders are one of the most dangerous units in Nick's army against the Flak Armored Guardsmen of the Astra Militarum. They are very fast, and they also have a special ability that lets them move even faster during the course of play. And that can put a whole bunch of very dangerous torrent weapons with the devastating wounds rule in kind of almost anywhere on the battlefield.
Torrent weapons.
Oh, ich bin auf das
Roll
Warp
for
Spider
those.
Datenblatt
But they
gespannt.
can't use that speed when they fall back, and they can't fall back and shoot freely unless they have a stratagem to somehow get around that and the CP to burn on it. So this is really interesting because what Andrew has done is he doesn't have a great deal of faith that his buzzsaws, although they just killed 2 Aspect Warriors.
I don't know. I think
oh no, he's piling it. He's piling it.
The saw is pretty good at taking out Toughness 3.
It
But
can,
they're
but it looks like he
decently
made. It looks like he made
They're
his saves.
decently armored.
I saw him moving the models, and I got excited about the chainsaws too early. but
Dreier
moving
Rüster.
into those units, he's creating a problem because Nick can't freely move them and shoot them because now he's going to be forced to fall back or just stand there with the Sentinels. So it's creative play by Andrew, the kind of things we expected to see in this game, where Nick has actually made a mistake putting his War Spiders up. Maybe he underestimated how far forward those Sentinels would move, and as a result, Andrew's going to kind of slow down that damage output that Nick can throw down at him. Until he can free those things up from combat.
I think that Andrew knows that those Sentinels are not long for this world. They're going to get over there, do a little work,
they are
and
doomed.
then be gone.
But they were in the
might
way.
be literally doomed.
Yeah.
They could.
Could we take a minute to just acknowledge how awesome it is that Nick was able to hand over a data card to Andrew and immediately explain everything about a unit?
It was actually a pretty magical thing to see. I don't think most Warhammer 40,000 players recognize how cool data cards are and how much of a quality of life improvement.
Something the Age of Sigmar players
They
have
are.
enjoyed.
Yeah, they are also available for free on the new app, which I'm looking at right now because the app, and I said this before, it actually works. You can build every single unit validly. It validates every single army. It handles all the allies, all the different quirks in the new edition. It comes
Wir
out
reden
with
gerade
the
ein
new
bisschen über die
edition,
App,
and
die
it,
funktioniert und die Datenblätter.
does everything, and it's free.
Bin mal echt
and
gespannt,
it's very
wie sich
good.
das entwickelt.
And it's not, a situation where you're going to start to build an army and it's going to go, no, it's not working. It's not letting me build the units in the armies I want to. It works from tip to toe perfectly. So I'm very excited about that. Sidebar, it has little data sheets in it, but if you don't have that, you have the cards at the table, and as mentioned, it's very easy to just go, well, what does that unit do? And you don't have to read it from a codex or hand them a book. You just
Here you go.
hand them a card, and there you're good to go.
This is 2,000 points. We're playing a match play game.
We are playing a match play game.
Also wenn ich jetzt ein bisschen still werde, ne, ich werde jetzt gerade ein bisschen müde.
We've been talking up a storm. Are there any particular curiosities that are
Well, I
landing
mean,
in the
folks
chat
definitely
for
want to see
us?
some data slates, which we will definitely try to show as much as we possibly can. I know we talked about Lord Solar Leontis. We have not shown him yet.
I don't want to do it yet.
We don't have
I
to
want
do
to
it
keep
yet.
him guessing. Even longer.
Well, let's bring up a Basilisk then, because we have
All
not
right.
talked about the Basilisk.
Let's take a look at the Basilisk.
Oh ja,
data
wir sehen den
sheet and see
Basilisken.
what's going on. Also, a huge mistake potentially by Andrew Gagnon on the primary. Before we see the Basilisk, actually, let's take a look at the actual turn and the mission. Remember, we have deploy servo skulls as the mission, which is where you want to push these center objectives toward your opponent's zone.
Got to kick them down there with those long
And
sentinel legs.
It reflects, and it thematically, the idea of pushing a battle line. And the more you get it toward your opponent, the more points you earn. Andrew made a mistake, though. By charging his sentinels, he left the objective in the middle, and so he doesn't control it, and so he's unable to move it, which is actually potentially a downside, because by going first, you kind of expose yourself first.
He's got another wave of troops he
He
can
has
bring
another
up.
way, but now Nick has the first chance to push it himself in his turn. Nick's also going to have to push back these ones, or they're going to start scoring points for Andrew next turn. It doesn't score until turn 2. And so it's going to immediately be a bit of an advantage Andrew here, because he's pushing those objectives toward Nick, and Nick's going to have to respond, or else run the risk that they move too far into his zone.
The chat is also saying that Nick definitely should have taken Wraithguard, and we should show those as well.
Why don't we save Wraithguard for later this weekend, maybe?
Yeah, we got a
sneak
whole
peek
weekend.
during the,
Yeah,
the
it's
coverage in Kansas City here, but we'll take a look at all
I
the data
also
sheets and
happen to
things.
like Wraithguard.
Wraithguard have a very cool rule. It's very much in the theme and vibe of the new edition, and so I'm sure people will love to see
So viel
it.
Datenblätter zu sehen.
One of the more
Ich kann es kaum erwarten, wenn die Indizes droppen.
On Sunday, there's going to be plenty of more Warhammer to talk about and show over the course of the weekend. We're definitely going to try to bring as much as we can to the stream. We really appreciate y'all being here and sharing this.
And
time
I
with
think
us.
we've held off long enough on the Basilisk, so while Nick begins to ponder his turn, and then we'll take a look at what he's pulled, Andrew, meanwhile, scored 8 points from his 2 secondary objectives, and so he's now discarded them. He scored them, and they're done. He's got 8 points on his secondary. We'll get that updated. Of course, you can see deploy teleport homers and secure no man's land for turn 1 for Andrew. He doesn't score his primary. Nobody does until turn 2. And we'll take a look at the Basilisk in the meantime.
It is worth noting that even though he missed the chance to move that objective, getting into Nick's deployment zone did get him an extra 2 points.
Because he was able to deploy teleport homers
Yes.
in Nick's... Oh, does he have an assault weapon that enabled him to be able to move and shoot in action, or did he action with the Scout Sentinels, thus denying him the ability to actually have completed the deploy teleport homer secondary there, Warner? We might have to correct the score on the table. Andrew may have been unable to.
Look, I said they're kicking the tires on
Double
some
check
of this
all of
stuff.
Learning the new edition.
Look
In
at
the
this
meantime,
Basilisk.
here's the meantime.
Basilisken.
Let's take a look at it.
240-inch range, always effective.
Gut, die Reichweite ist lächerlich mit
Yeah, it's,
240
a bit of a
Zoll.
range. You can only shoot
Was
things
haben
that
wir?
are on the
10
table,
Zoll,
however, you
Toughness
cannot shoot
9,
neighbors,
11 Lebenspunkte,
cat,
3er
dog,
Safe,
whatever
7er
particular
Leadership.
thing is annoying you that
Or Anybody's
Dreier
playing two
Objective
tables
Control.
over.
No, that's definitely not in
Das ist
the
okay.
cards. You only can shoot them
Ist
from
mit
the
einem
table.
Heavy
But if you're
Bolter,
thinking
Armor
about
Tracks
it,
und
if
einer
you
Earthshaker Cannon
wanted
ausgerüstet.
to, like, bounce it off the side of
Earthshaker
the
Cannon
table
ist
into, you know, through a
Blast
couple
Heavy
windows,
Indirect Fire.
back outside and then back onto the table
Nur
and make an
AP2.
attack. You can do that as
Das
well.
heißt,
There you
Cover
go.
ist ein Ding,
Absolutely.
aber zum Glück
And look,
ignoriert die das ja.
Warhammer 40,000 at the end of the day is an
Wenn, oder
incredibly
sie ignoriert es
thematic,
nicht direkt.
fun,
It's a
exciting game.
staple. If that was anything less,
So, wir haben
be disappointed.
W6 plus 3 Schuss,
So,
Stärke 8
we
minus
take a look
2,
here,
2.
and,
Also gar nicht
you'll
so
notice
wilder
that there's a
Beschuss.
couple of things going on. One, you can pick
Trifft auf die 3, wenn du einen Sentinel in Sichtlinie hast.
infantry unit from the Earthshaker rounds and
Und du
slows them
kriegst wieder hier
down.
minus
Minus
2 auf
two
den
from the move characteristic,
Move
minus two
und
from
minus
the
2 auf
So finally,
Advanced und
the
Charge
Earthshaker
Rolls.
cannon shakes the earth natively with what it does. Additionally,
Gut.
of course, it's a pretty good
Find ich
weapon.
okay?
D6 plus 3 shots.
Finde
The
ich
Earthshaker
richtig,
isn't really
richtig
an
okay.
anti-tank round. It's more of like a heavy
Ist nicht
infantry
komplett
suppression and
drüber,
heavy infantry
AP2 ist
type
okay.
of, artillery. It still can do significant
Kommt immer ein
damage
bisschen
to
drauf
light
an, wie
vehicles, as we saw.
Cover
Aeldari
ignoriert.
vehicles are all toughness 7 for the most
Aber
part for the light ones,
Stärke
just
8 ist
threes
natürlich jetzt
by
auch nicht gegen
the Earthshaker, it's also quite good
Anti-Fahrzeuge.
against things like
Das heißt,
two
die
infantry
macht
and
gegen
whatnot.
Fahrzeuge gar nicht so viel. Die ist eher gegen Infanterie oder gegen
But it's
Bikes
not,
oder sowas.
it's not
relativ
it's not an
annoying.
all-rounder, which is one of the nice changes of the toughness range changes in the edition, is that in the past, making a weapon strength 8
Erleichtert mich ein bisschen.
meant it wounded everything pretty much on 3s and 4s or better. By having more of a range of toughness, it allows for some of these mid-range weapons that aren't supposed to be both good at killing tanks and good at killing heavy infantry and good at killing light infantry. Just kind of like with the automatic all-rounders to take. Why would you ever take a one-shot las cannon when you have a D6 plus 3-shot strength 8 weapon that wounds things the same as a las cannon? And so the toughness change to vehicles has been really breathed a lot of fresh air into the variety of units that function in the game.
well, also the toughness characteristic of like your average size infantry type models is largely the same or similar.
Yeah.
Across, you know, I'm not talking about every day card, of course, but largely similar. So these weapons that function really well into those even like heavily armored infantry units are going to be pretty good.
I think so. And we also, I'll tell you again, Andrew has a hunter killer missile on all 4 of his indirect tanks that are hiding behind ruins.
He's playing with fire.
Why would he have chosen to take a hunter killer missile?
He likes to live dangerously.
Why would he have paid points to do that? I don't know, but he has a
I
hunter
don't know.
killer missile.
I don't know that he
whenever they
did.
want him. Also, some big brain stuff in Andrew's list. 2 of those indirect vehicles have a heavy flamer instead of a heavy bolter. Why do you think that is, Paul?
Well, because torrent auto hits.
Torrent auto
and
hits.
when you're overwatching and things are kind of up in your grill, I used to always pack a couple of heavy flamers on my backline artillery. And people are like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You're eventually going to get there with some termagants, and I got to clear it out.
Absolutely, and I think it's just one of the coolest things about things like Overwatch and Torrent, and how much of a glow up it's gotten, even just through the Overwatch rule, is that when, you know, the
Wir reden jetzt gerade ein bisschen über Overwatch und Flamer. Ist ein bisschen obsolet, wenn du in Nahkampf reinschießen kannst.
and a lot of your stuff
Limited
is dead.
resources. You're asking a lot from each thing you
Those
have.
tanks
functioning
might
on
have
the
to
table.
go out and move an objective or something, and if they do and they have that heavy flamer, you can take that Overwatch when they try to get near you to turn the cards, and so make those last desperate plays by having some cool toolkit weapons up your sleeve near the end.
Wir haben jetzt den Wave-Stop
We've got
gesehen, der sich bewegt und
2
jetzt steigen die
basilisks standing
Dire-Avengers
back
da
and
unten
2
aus.
wyverns as well.
Ich bin
And
hart
yes,
gespannt,
indirect,
was die
he
Jungs
is
machen.
-1 to hit. However,
I like that battery.
those Scout Sentinels that are way up the field are also within 18 inches of things they can pick with their daring recon rule we saw earlier. So that was one of the things that probably helped with dealing with those targets, is ignoring the indirect to hit penalty, because those Scout Sentinels could pick targets to focus on and radio in the coordinates for to those basilisks on the other side.
Loving it.
So we do have a scoring quick update. So those scores were just flipped. Nothing went wrong. It was 5 points from Secure No Man's Land and 3 from Teleport.
I gotcha. Okay, so he did the teleport homers with a different unit somewhere potentially.
Yep.
That
And then
makes
we do have Nyx as well.
So Nick has Bring It Down and Deploy Teleport Homer himself, so he drew the same one that
Spannend.
Andrew did. It looks like he's already got some units in the middle that could potentially do the deploying of the Teleport Homer. Remember that
Dann
they
ziehst du
cannot
Bring It Down.
deploy a Teleport Homer if
Und jetzt hat der
they
Gegner
don't
keine
shoot for that
Fahrzeuge.
turn, or make a charge. They could still, in theory, fight in combat if they were already there. and if they
Hasse.
had, like, allowed them to shoot
Geht
in
jetzt.
combat.
Und es wird auch eine
They're still
Fahrzeugedition. Also
they
das
can
ist,
still
glaube ich, in
do it.
Ordnung.
How many wounds do
Aber
those
jetzt spielst du
Sentinels
gegen
have?
Grey Knights
7
irgendwie mit,
wounds each.
7 wounds each. That's pretty
mit
hard
Dread
on
Knights oder
It is,
sowas.
but
Und dann,
honestly, I think with the number of vehicles that Andrew has, that's probably something Nick's going to get a fair number of points from this turn, and that's good timing for Nick. He's still got a lot of firepower alive and the ability to put some hurt on some Sentinels, which are some nearby targets. There's also that Torox over there. And one of the things that you'll also notice is, again, what does this icon mean there, Paul?
Oh, it can be fixed.
This is another one of those objectives that works as both a tactical or as a fixed objective. And so if he had chosen fixed objectives, he could have had to bring it down for the whole game, which might have been a great play against all of the armor in Andrew's list. But it's certainly going to come into play in this turn because every Sentinel that goes down is going to get him 2 points, up to a max of 8 for the turn, and he gets 1 extra VP because he's doing it tactically instead of fixed. For the 1 turn only, he's able to do it. So if he kills 3 Sentinels, that's 7 points, right? Because he's going to get 2 per Sentinel that has a wounds characteristic of less than 10.
Und 8 Maximalscore.
And then he's going to get +1 for having done it with tactical. And if he can do more than that, he
Also
can
bring it
do more.
down,
And
machst
it's very
quasi,
possible
tötest
those, fire
Fahrzeuge,
prisms might be able to
kriegst
get
2 Punkte
shots
für jedes
on the
Fahrzeug oder
backside.
Monster, das du
Fire
tötest.
prisms are certainly a
Und
spicy.
kriegst dann nochmal einen Bonuspunkt, wenn du die Karte gezogen hast. Und dann gibt es nochmal Bonuspunkte, wenn die Einheiten mehr als 10 Lebenspunkte hatte.
Earlier in the game and kind of see how that might come into play this
Getting
turn.
around all that terrain might be a little different. Remember, we mentioned it's almost kind of like indirect for one of them, and the other one would have to get there to see.
But if he can see his friend, he can shoot through him. So, Fire Prisms, again, one of those classic cases where there was an entire stratagem card in the front matter of the book, and all it was to allow Fire Prisms to do their classic thing of linked fire.
Hier sehen wir nochmal das Fire Prism
Really focusing
Datasheet.
on the data sheets and the actual units doing the work instead of the, quote, front matter of a book in the new edition.
Crystal Target, Crystal Matrix, volle Hit, volle Wound Rerolls, weil die durch ihre Detachment Ability Rerolls bekommen und natürlich nochmal durch ihre eingebaute Crystal Matrix.
When selecting targets for the
Stark.
Focus Lance version weapon,
Jetzt kommt der Panzer und bewegt sich.
visibility from a friendly Fire Prism to any model that is visible to the Fire Prism itself.
60-inch range, so can definitely reach out.
Was
and
jetzt
touch
vor allem
someone.
auch
Not
geht,
240 inches though. Basilisk is better.
That is kind of interesting that a lot of the Aeldari weapons are shorter range for their other equivalents, potentially in other things, but they hit a little bit harder.
They definitely do. And so, additionally,
AP4 ist
the
halt auch
detachment rule
richtig
for
stark.
Aeldari is that each unit can reroll a hit roll and a wound roll when they shoot, and you'll notice that the Crystal Matrix also lets you do that. So when you fire that double shot, Fire Prism, big old 6 damage main shot, you basically get to reroll both shots to hit and to wound.
I'm digging that. I like the
So-
reliability.
That gives us a good thing. We also know that the Fire Prism can choose to target from each other, so no matter where they are, if this Fire Prism can see something, this Fire Prism can see it too.
Terrain layout here, pretty well spaced to give some interesting firing lanes and also some cover and some intervening terrain. I like it.
But not too many. Basically, right now the Fire Prisms can see. Whoop! We got the. They can see this Sentinel, of course, and it's a bit trouble. These 2 Sentinels are actually quite difficult to see for the Fire Prisms, but I think we've got line of sight right there to them.
Their striking scorpion should be able to take down the Sentinel.
Striking Scorpions are actually moved up here.
Oh, they moved him up there.
They're really an anti-infantry unit. They're not really an anti-tank killing unit, and you'll see that when we take a look at their data sheet later. But he's moving them up probably to try and take a charge. He's going to charge either these guys or he's going to charge at these guys and see if he can get himself stuck in. He's also getting Azerman and the Dire Avengers out over here. So
we looked at Asherman earlier. Can join the units of Dire Avengers, fit in that Wave Serpent quite nicely.
Yep, and it's quite a dangerous unit because it's both offensive and defensive in the way that it works. Azerman allows the unit he's joined to Overwatch for 0 CP, even if another unit has already done it that turn. So not only does he have Overwatch with things like his Warp Spiders, but even after having done so, he could then Overwatch again with Azerman.
was wir über die Warp Spiders übrigens schon gehört haben, ist,
For us at this point.
Where's Karandris?
dass sie Torrent haben und
Is Karandris
Devastating
in the
Wounds.
list?
Karandris is in the list. He's attached to the unit. He's either, might be this model right here. You can't kill, you can't intentionally, this is an interesting thing, nuance of the rules. You cannot intentionally put wounds on your character first in an attached unit. You're just not allowed to. So there's no like using a durable model to tank for a bunch of more fragile models, as was the case in some editions of the past.
When you start allocating wounds to, I know the character can't be chosen, but if you were to choose a model in your unit to start allocating hits to, you got to keep doing it.
You do until that model is dead. And more importantly, they just won't let you allocate to the character at all until the unit is dead. And that prevents any kind of weird shenanigans in the way that things work. The exception to that, of course, is precision with things like the Ranger's weapons. And one of the, I think, the unheralded stratagems of the edition so far, and one that might come into play with the charge that potentially is coming up here, because he's got those fate dice to help make sure it happens, is Heroic Challenge.
Oh, the challenge.
The Heroic Challenge.
Yep.
This is one of those like subtle, perhaps misunderstood stratagems. I haven't
Epic
seen a lot of people.
challenge.
Epic Challenge.
Epic
is what it's
challenge.
called. So Epic Challenge effectively gives one of your characters the precision rule in melee. Well, when you see how Karandris functions, it's going to be especially relevant that this platoon squad has a couple of characters attached to it. And when you get into combat, those characters are quite well hidden unless you turn on Epic Challenge. And we might want to take a look at that Epic Challenge stratagem here on the screen, Tech Priest Warning, when you get a second. And it can turn some dangerous characters into character killers in combat. So, when you pick a character from a unit, to fight.
Also es ist auf jeden Fall ein sehr interessantes Spiel, weil du viele Sachen gezeigt bekommst. Das ist auf jeden Fall cool. Aber dem Spiel zu folgen ist richtig schwierig.
Of the new edition being played, where a Sisters of Battle unit had two very cool characters in it.
Ein bisschen Artillerie, die schießt da rum. Ich hätte gerne die Shadow Weaver gesehen.
Angron got all the way in their lines and had just a couple wounds left and charged into them.
Oh no.
And the Adeptus Sororitas player kind of chuckled, and they were like, well, I've got 10 Sisters of Battle in the way, so you're not going to kill all of them before my characters finish off Angron. So Angron went, Epic Challenge.
Epic Challenge? And does Epic Challenge allow you to split your attacks between different characters?
It allows you to allocate wounds to characters first. So the characters aren't a different unit. You just simply attack the unit, and you can allocate to characters first.
Yeah, allocate the attacks to the character.
Suffice to say, there were no characters left by the time that unit could swing back at Angron in that particular experience, and it was a very entertaining outcome of the game because of this Epic Challenge stratagem.
Keeping a couple command points in your back pocket for some of these great stratagems that are available to everyone.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I think that's important is there's lots of great stratagems, but command points are a very precious resource. We noticed that Nick only has one command point at this point because he used one last turn in order to Overwatch.
For the Overwatch? Yep.
And so he's only generated one, and so there's some really powerful stratagems, even in the core ones, but you only have a limited resource with which to use them. We'll also notice that Andrew is very careful with his command points because he has a very powerful stratagem himself that allows him to bring units back into strategic reserve when they're killed. But
that's an Astra Militarum only stratagem.
Astra Militarum only one. But if he doesn't have 2 CP, he can't do it. And so Andrew will frequently find himself having to sit on his numerous command points because if he uses them on all the other wealth of options available, he's not going to be able to do the big play.
Yeah, it's a little smoke screen action maybe. You could do Heroic Intervention if you wanted to.
Heroic Intervention is another. There's so many of them that we could potentially talk about. So let's take a look at the game state. So we've got the various weaponry in the army shooting. We've got the Dire Avengers shooting at the Death Corps here. We've got a Viper who's moved up in order to push this Servo Skull and action with Deploy Teleport Homer in order to get some points. We've got shooting, of course, from the various Aeldari that are down here that's clearing off the 2 annoying Sentinels who pushed their entire army back. It's some Storm Guardians that shot fusion guns in and killed one of them. We've got some Wind Riders alive as well, and we'll take a look at that Wind Rider unit because they're actually quite durable once they have a chance to turn things on.
Speaking of turning things on, you're talking about the attached characters, the complexity of the unit we're talking about with the Farseer and the Warlock.
Yeah, he's got a Warlock on a Skyrunner as well. So we are taking a look at the battlefield here, and we've noticed, Wind Riders. We can actually finally see the Wind Riders there, Tech Priest.
You'll notice that the squads have minimums and maximums on this second page of the card.
Oh, Wind Rider, sehr geil. Shurikenkanone, Sustained Hits 1, AP 1, Scatterlaser Stärke 5, 36 Zoll Reichweite, immer noch gut. Swifty Mice, Reroll 1 to Hit, wenn sie gegen das Closest Eligible Target schießen, oder wenn sie auf einem
And
sehe ich das gerade richtig?
Just like today, each of the models in the unit can swap their scatter laser for either a or
ja,
a twin shirt
wenn sie gegen eine Einheit schießen, die auf einem Marker ist, können sie einfach volle Rerolls anmachen.
All scatter lasers, so a whole bunch of shots from the unit.
It's always been a debate. Scatter lasers versus the Shuriken Cannon, you know, the extra punch of the
Das ist
Shurikens.
schon juicy mit den Twin Shuriken Katapulten, 18 Zoll, direkt draufgehen. Reroll 1 to Hit, Assault, Advancen.
With just about everything shooting with his Wind Riders.
Look, sometimes that's why we roll the dice.
So they got indirected to start the game, and then they whiffed with a lot of their shots. So they're struggling a bit today, but that's okay. They've, despite their reliability,
gefällt mir. Scatterlaser mit 36 Zoll ist auch schick mit vollen Hit-Rerolls. Gegen leichte Infanterie auf jeden Fall eine starke Einheit. Wird sich mal zeigen, was so passiert. Ich kann mir vorstellen, dass da noch irgendwie AP-Veränderungen dazu kommt.
Yeah, and you got a comment in the chat here. Is that the game seems to take about the same amount of time, but more interactive? They don't mind that.
My experience has been that these are folks who are playing these games for basically the first or second time ever. And so the games take a little longer because none of them have any of the rules memorized yet. So despite the fact that they don't know many of these rules and having to look up everything and talk through everything, it's taking as long as a game that they're very familiar with takes. So I'd say that once you get familiar with the new edition, it's actually vastly faster than is the case today. The thing that makes the Wind Rider unit especially powerful is the way that it works with these two models. So the Farseer on foot can also give a friendly unit within 12 inches
Was
fortune,
gucken wir
which is
denn da?
-1 to wound. Which is almost
Ignores
certainly
Cover
what
ist
happens with Wind
stark
Riders. So the Wind
und
Riders
Stealth
have
ist
-1
auch
to wound
gut.
from the Farseer on foot. And then the Farseer Skyrunner has given the unit likely guide, or given it to another unit that was nearby for rerolling hits in whenever they attack. The unit also has Eldritch Storm from the Farseer Skyrunner as a shooting attack, which is quite powerful, as well as another Twin Link Shuriken Catapult. So those units add a bunch of shooting. And then the Warlock Skyrunner. Let's kind of like focus on that Warlock Skyrunner real quick and bring it forward. So the Warlock Skyrunner in the unit, every command phase, you choose, your command phase, you choose whether or not the unit conceals and gains stealth, so -1 to be hit.
The duality of the Warlock power is still in effect here.
Or instead give the unit ignores cover, which improves that shooting even more. Because remember,
Gefällt mir
you
gut.
generally don't have quite the same 2-up cover saves
Gefällt mir echt gut.
anyway. And so
Was
this
wir hier
Warlock
sehen.
unit, or the Skyrunner
Warlock
starts at
Skyrunner,
has
sehr, sehr geil.
36 scatter laser shots.
Destructor ist ein normaler Schuss.
It's
12 Zoll
-1
ist
to be hit
okay.
with fortune.
Torrent trifft automatisch.
-1 to be
Stärke
hit
5
with
-1, also schwerer Flammenwerfer.
But it's not invincible.
Ähm,
And with going first in the
Und dann
case
hast du
of,
halt Stealth
Andrew, that
oder
input
du
doesn't
hast
whittle
Ignore
down,
Cover.
so it's not quite
Das
as
ist,
potent as it
das ist
might
gut.
be.
Das ist
Full strength. Of
actually
course, it also has
richtig gut. Vor allem, wenn der
Destructor.
Gegner irgendwie
So
durch
even
indirektes
as a
Feuer
torn
schießt mit Heavy
It's quite a
Weapons,
versatile unit.
dann trifft er trotzdem auf die 5. Das heißt,
That
wenn du
is
deine
a
Buffs
psychic
abkriegst,
attack.
It is a
A
psychic
psychic
cool.
ranged
Was
attack.
mir
There's
nicht
been a lot of questions
gefällt,
about how psychic,
ist in deiner
when do
Command
you
Phase. Das
figure out
heißt,
if a weapon is
going
psychic or
first is
attack is psychic
big.
or whatnot.
Yep, we saw the contorted epitome earlier, and the feel no pain against psychic attacks. So this is another example of a case where they would get that.
So, in the meantime, by the way, we've had some deaths over there in Andrew's list.
Oh
So, over here we've got the Viper, and the Viper targeted and shot that Taurox with a Bright Lance, used some Fate Dice shenanigans in conjunction, and took out that Taurox. So, that's one vehicle down for Andrew.
Bringing it
Plus, the
down?
Scout Sentinel went down. I think the Taurox is a 10-win model, so it's actually worth 3 points.
Three points.
Bring it
Getting
down.
a couple from the Sentinel.
And
Genau,
so
also
Nick
der
is
Nick wird jetzt
already
mit seinem
exceeding
Bring
his
It Down
points.
richtig
He's got
viele
2
Punkte
from
machen.
3 for the Taurox and 1 for having done it as a tactical objective instead of as a fixed objective. So he's already sitting at 6 points from that secondary this turn, which is a good punchback from the early good turn that Andrew had to start the game. And as mentioned, these are 2 of the better players really in the
Da haben wir
world.
Liebel-Hits.
It's really exciting to see them get their mitts on a new edition of Warhammer 40,000, and they specifically went into this game with the direction from us being to take the gloves off.
Ich würde es gerne. Das sind die Die Avengers.
Armies that
Das
they
ist
are
der,
familiar with as far as like the
Lethal
concept of
Hits
how
haben
the
die jetzt.
Astra Militarum work,
Sehr
how
cool.
the Aeldari work. So they're able to kind of slot into them very easy here on day 1 of them playing with them. So that's nice to see.
And that was a big part of how these lists were designed. We basically asked, well, what models are you going to have with you in Kansas City in the first place? And then they were able to like leverage that pool to build out their 2,000-point lists, and we've asked them to basically play the toughest game you can, guys, and let's see how creative you can get with the rules. And we've already seen a fair bit of that early on, which is quite exciting for me. It's always great to see sort of the community.
Kriegen wir
step
raus, was da
into the
geschossen
things
hat? Ich
that
glaube,
the
wir kriegen
studios
nicht raus,
worked
was
on
da
for so
geschossen hat.
long,
Ist ein
and
bisschen schade.
we're on the cusp of seeing that across millions of games all over the world once the edition releases in full in the very near future.
And I am kind of surprised. I'm curious if the Wyverns just basically had a kind of maybe a bad string of number of attacks, and then the conversion on the hit and wounds. I'm really expecting to see more of them in the next turn.
It's still just an AP0 weapon. It's still 2d6 shots, so there's some unreliability in the number of shots. So it looks quite scary on paper, but practicality, when you actually do the math, it's not as good as you might otherwise think.
We were actually talking about that earlier, is that how you can look at a unit in a vacuum, and we use the rail cannons as an example from the Tau. It's like when you're looking at it on the paper, like, wow, that is amazing. But then when you start actually looking at the tactics of how you interact with that, oh, there's some cover on here. There's some, I've done this or that. It becomes contextual. Where it has a different perspective.
So, jetzt kommen die Strength Scorpions und chargen.
How it all
Ich
works
bin
out
echt
over the course of
gespannt.
an
Ich hoffe, das Datenblatt ist noch zu
game.
sehen.
So, when we, someone's asked if we have an approximate release date, we are definitely not going to tell you a release date on this stream. I just want to make sure nobody feels let down late in the evening. That's not coming. But it's right around the corner, folks. We don't make it a habit of telling you all about a new edition, only for it to be months and months and months and months and months, or years or decades away. So it's definitely not decades away. Okay, I just want to confirm.
Definitely not. You heard it here first.
The new
not
edition is
decades
not
away.
decades away. All right, so now that we've revealed the reality of its release timing, not decades away, we'll get back to the game on the tabletop. And perhaps it's finally time.
Lord
Take a
Solar
look.
Leontis.
And Lord Solar Leontis. Does everyone want to see Lord Solar Leontis, or do people just want us to not do that? This is basically.
We're doing it.
I want to see what the chat says. Chat, should we just not show Lord Solar at any point
Don't let me down, Chad.
during the course of? All right, we got to pass. You know, like, nah.
Jetzt fragen Sie den Chat, was Sie...
Nah, I see more no's than yeses over here. Yeah, there's a skip it. Okay, so we're going to skip Leontis
We
for
are
a
not.
bit longer.
We are definitely not. I wouldn't let you do that.
Paul is
Tech Priest Warner and I are linked in mind and in spirit.
Fine. I suppose that's what we're going to have to do. So let's take a look at the Lord Solar before Andrew gets
So, wen sehen wir auch so da? Das neueste Guard-Modell.
A great character. I love the way it looks. He's basically very incredibly majestic there, leading the guard and getting all into being able to lead and order out vehicles and infantry units.
Oh, we're going to have to show something creative that's going to occur as well, too. So there's a reason that
Gucken wir mal, was sich allem anschließen kann, bevor wir das... Also gehen wir mal schnell drüber. Wir haben jetzt nicht so viel Zeit, uns darüber zu unterhalten. Er hat immer noch so eine Pistole mit 2 Schaden. Er hat immer noch ein bisschen Nahkampf, 12 Zoll Bewegung, 8 Wunden, 4er Widerstand, 3er Safe, 4er Retter. Das ist identisch geblieben. Kann 3 Befehle geben. Und zwar zu allen Einheiten. Am Anfang deines Zuges kriegst du 1 CP. Das Kollege der Astrolax, das war bis jetzt immer, oder das war was bis jetzt immer plus 1 CP, ist jetzt
some people go like, why does a 12-inch move unit only join a 6-inch move squad? Well,
ist ein Redeploy, da kannst du das ist der Redeploy, da kannst du 3 Einheiten, Astra Militarum, redeployed, und du kannst hier auch die strategische Reserve setzen, das ist ganz cool. Er ist Leader für Aeldari Rough Rider, KD Shock Troops, Catapult Jungle Fighters, Death Crop Krieg, Infanterie Squad und Kazakin. Also er kann sich quasi den Infanterietrupps anschließen. Mounted Character, Epic Hero, Imperium Officer, Lord Solar Leontus. Cool. Er macht einmal was, danach steht er hinten rum und bufft dich mit dem CP und gibt dir Befehle. Finde ich gut.
So Soul's Righteous Gaze is his pistol. It's a pretty good shot. Actually, it's got the same potency as a basilisk round when it lands.
Strength 8, neg 2 AP, 2 damage.
It's very righteous.
2 attacks.
And gazy. And of course, his melee weapons are pretty good as well. You know, he's not going to end the world in combat, but 6 attacks for a guardsman hitting on 2s.
Well,
no slouch
let's
at all.
look at the stat profile here. Is that what we've seen is the stats have moved away from up here for the attack and wound profiles and moved down into the weapons themselves.
That's true.
Which can be reflective, of course, of the characters and what you expect to see, but separated from this top line stat.
Substantial quality of life improvement too over how these things generally work. Just the design concepts and the thinking and the effort that have gone into the new edition are really, in my opinion, one of the better things.
Ich glaube ja.
There's a whole bunch of blasting going into some deathcore here from the
was wir auch sehen,
the fire prisms in the
dass es
Aeldari.
wieder die Infanterietrupps getrennt geben wird. Also wir haben es ja mit den Deathcore-Trupps schon gesehen, aber auch Katashan, Cadians und normale Infanterie-Squads.
Let's jump back to the game and see what's happening.
All right. So, some deathcore are getting shot. That's certainly part of what's happening as an experience here on the battlefield. And I think one of the things that's going to be really important is this charge. So, we know that Nick has some fate dice left, and I'm guessing just by the size of the squad, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here you guys count me on the screen. I'm guessing there's a few more guardsmen under the wall here, and so the distance that these striking scorpions have to charge is not an insurmountable distance, and they are very dangerous in combat. If they make that charge, we're going to take a look at them up close. And Andrew might be finding his volume of infantry, and I think he has close to 100 infantry models, curtailed a little bit by the experience of this turn. Find out whether or not he regrets.
Oh, the Manda Blasters and the Scorpion Chainswords.
We're going to find out whether he regrets bringing back those Sentinels instead of bringing back a whole horde of guardsmen here.
You might have got a little impulsive with them, you think?
I don't know. We're going to find out. So, in a bit, we'll take a look at that regimental stratagem. We've got Tech Priest Warner adjusting the camera so we can zoom in on some of the activity that's going on the battlefield.
And it's fun to do stuff just because you can sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yep.
Some men just want to watch the world burn, as they say.
Some folks want to jump on the top of a Lehman Russ and drive across with a Power Sword.
Boah, ich würde so gerne die Shadow Weaver jetzt sehen. Ich will dieses Leaken hier, das macht mich verrückt. Das macht mich so richtig hart verrückt.
We're going to bring everything we possibly can. I know the chat has some requests, and why wouldn't they? We're the same way. We're fans of this just as much as they are. But it's going to be a long weekend.
All right, we're gonna quote what's happening here with these Scorpions and these Guardsmen. All right, that's the experience I think that the
Hi.
Guardsmen are feeling.
Please no.
And it's really going to be close here. The Striking Scorpions, we're going to have to pull up their data sheet here shortly, and then we'll pull up Courandrous when the actual combat begins. But of course, this is one of those larger guard squads that they're attacking. It's got a platoon command squad attached to it. It's got a Primaris Psyker, which gives them an invulnerable save actually against shooting if he pulls off his psychic power. But not so much in combat against a bunch of Striking Scorpions.
Yeah,
So
Striking Scorpions
see
is,
how
we
that
don't
works
do
in a
any of
second.
that.
So why don't we start? Oh, is he rolling a charge now? Is that what's going on? Nope, we're still got shooting and durability going on.
Oh, trying to get some saves, couple hits, couple of wounds.
Diese
A couple of
Reroll-Konsistenz. Das
Well,
macht
we'll get
einfach
some
Spaß,
updates
die
about
Elle
what's happening
anzuschauen.
on the field, but why don't we, in the
A couple of
meantime-
saves.
Oh man, he's bouncing,
Yeah, look at
bouncing
that.
those attacks.
Look at, so you know what?
And
He
Jetzt
must
kommt
have
der
got a second
Charge.
power off, so he got some
Here.
invulnerable. I like this, moving the train out of the way to see exactly what the distance has to be rolled. That way, there's no
Look at that
confusion there.
veteran players
they
talking
would-
about things. Also, leaving that thing off there so we can see what happens from the camera down view.
The terrain will get replaced. That's one of the things. But right now, you don't want it to influence what the measurement might look like. You might as well clear it out of the way. Just
Achtung,
to see what
Charge.
happens.
Seems entirely logical to me, Paul.
And
Of course, they're
here we
infantry, so
see
they
some
can
fate dice being
reach.
used.
Are they using the fate dice to make sure this charge passes there, I suppose?
Yep, looks like he's pulled out 5 and a 2.
All right, so Nick has gone here and he has measured the distance here to see how much of a charge he's going to make. He's seen what he needs, and he's pulled out the fate dice that guarantees that charge succeeds.
So what you guys saw is basically you did not roll
Oh
the
mein
dice, no
Gott,
dice
Das
replacement.
ist ja
It
auch
was just
super gut mit den Fate
as
Dice.
if you rolled the dice.
Aber wenn du nicht
That's
basen
what
kannst,
the
kannst du
fate dice
dich.
became.
Oh, das.
And how do you feel about
Leute,
that?
Leute,
He
Leute,
only-
Leute.
he only
Ich
needed
muss
a
euch so
seven.
viel erzählen.
He needed an 8.
Über
Oh, he
dieses
needed
Spiel.
an 8.
6 and a 2.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So he
It's a
pulled it.
symbol on
So
that.
did he turn it into a 6, or did he have a 6 sitting around in his fate dice pool?
I will double check.
Needing an 8, I feel like we already thought that his fate dice pool was getting mighty thin this early in the game.
All right, so Nick also took advantage of the Farseer's ability. So Farseers have an ability, and it's reflective of one of the design principles of the new edition. So every Farseer type model has an ability that lets a Farseer in your army, once per turn, change a fate dice used by a unit within 12 inches into a 6 instead of whatever
number
it
it
otherwise
was,
was. This is written in a
Jungs, ich
careful
will
way
jetzt sehen,
such
wie
that
dieses
having
Striking
multiple
Scorpions diesen
Farseers
Guardtrupp
does not
einfach
let you
raufhauen.
change multiple fate
Das
dice.
muss jetzt einfach passieren. Da ist Karantras
Any of
drin.
your Farseers once per turn.
Das ist eine
can
Menge Würfel.
change one dice into a 6. And so what Nick has done is cleverly used one of his 1s from his fate roll. And you can see it here. Once per turn, when you use a fate dice for a model or unit within 12 inches of a Farseer, one model can use this ability. So you can only do it once per turn. More Farseers doesn't let you do more of it. So arguably, you wouldn't spam Farseers just for the
manifest
sake
like
of
just 4 6s real quick.
Exactly. And there's some reflections of that in other rules. You'll notice that like Space Marine captains have a cool ability that lets them do some stratagem shenanigans, but it lets a captain in your army do it, not every captain you have do it. And so this has been some of the principles in the design of the edition. Instead of telling you you're only allowed to have one of a model, you use the rules writing to incentivize that. Why would you take 3 of the same model? Why would you have
or
3
if you just like
captains?
the aesthetic, or that's your theme.
Exactly.
You come from the craft world of nothing but Farseers.
And if you want to take them, you can, but there's not a rules thing that encourages you to spam them to get some kind of creative advantage over a bunch of other models.
Hört
Suffice
auf zu
to say,
labern, zeigt uns die Striking Scorpions,
used
Jungs.
a 2 from the Fate Dice pool and turned a 1 into a 6 to get that 8-inch charge. And let's pull up that Striking Scorpion data sheet and take a look at what these guys do when they start.
I do agree with the 8. You don't want to be in a position where
Habt ihr
you're
mich
rolling
gehört?
just try to get the 8s there.
Yeah, and it's a risky gamble.
When it's so
you play.
critical.
And he used a Fate Dice of a 1 and a 2 in the end to do it. So
Yeah.
creative play using that Farseer ability and keeping it within 12 inches of the Scorpions, using his Jetbike Farseer before he made that charge.
And as you
So-
see there, he's all nestled up into the guard line. He has to get into base contact with everyone who can make
And
it
remember,
there.
a couple of the Scorpions did die from indirect fire, but it's still a pretty healthy team, so we're going to see what they do here. So, each Scorpion
Mega
has a
wild,
bunch
was
of
da jetzt
attacks
passiert.
with their Scorpion
Jetzt
shields.
kommen wir sie. Wir
They
sehen
have
sie.
sustained hits, so every time they roll a 6, they get an additional hit.
Budding Blade.
Only strength 4 AP, damage 1 AP 0, but there's one big thing that the Manda Blasters give them. And you asked earlier, why are the Scorpions not taking care of
Devastating
the
Wounds. Gefällt mir
Well,
das.
They don't do very well against things with monster or vehicle keywords. They're just strength 4 AP 0. But against infantry or non-monster vehicle units, when they
Und
roll a
4
6 to
Attacken pro
wound,
Modell, das ist schick.
that's a mortal
Das ist
wound.
gut.
Devastating wounds.
They blend infantry, as they say.
There we
Watch
go.
that channel, like, will it blend? Well, it's infantry.
That is a bit of a change. Now I'm thinking about just volume of attacks. Get in there, and they could maybe whittle
Gucken wir
down
uns
that.
mal,
But you're right, Nick did have
Karantras
enough
an.
in his back lines to take out those sentinels. Might as
Astra's
well get
Bane
those,
ist,
striking scorpions up, doing what they do
Isematil,
best.
Yep, now
Isematil.
Strength Scorpions are still just a
Sustained
toughness 3 when we
hits,
remodel. I do not
8
expect them to
Attacken,
last very long after this experience,
Stärke 6
but
minus
they are
1 und
gonna
dann haben wir
blind some
Ashras
infantry before
Bane,
they go
Stärke
down.
8 minus
So,
3,
he's
2.
rolling a bunch of rolls. He's gonna get some mortals and some saves on those guardsmen. Now that guard squad has a medic in the platoon command squad that's been attached, so they do have a feel no pain roll even against the mortals. We'll talk about that later in terms of how
I
these
love it that Feel No
complicated
Pain's
units work.
back. See, we've been talking about Feel No Pain on the stream for now a couple of years.
It's gonna be a busy medic.
You know,
Die
folks
Striking
maybe didn't know
Scorpions
what we
haben
were talking about.
3er Rüstung,
Yes, now
5er
they do.
Retter immer noch.
Additionally, let's take a look at Karandras and see how he differs a little bit from his Scorpion followers.
Plus
He's
1
sort
to
of-
hit,
sort of
ist
a
gut.
Scorpion
I love Karandras.
ascended, you might say. So let's take a look at him.
Und
he
was
knows
jetzt
he has
auch gut ist, die
infiltrators
Money
just like the rest
Blaster
of his
sind
unit.
nicht mehr...
Everybody in the unit needs to have that rule, so if you attach a non-infiltrator to an infiltrating unit, you can't just carry them along. And so they both have infiltrators, so the whole unit can infiltrate if they want to. And, of course, he's a leader. Shadowhunter means, and it's a common thing, you saw it with Azerman as well, the Phoenix Lords will almost always give a +1 to hit to their unit of their aspect when they follow them. He's got a 4-up invulnerable save, unlike Azerman's 3-up. Azerman always has that like slightly better invulnerable save. It's traditional and part of the lore for him.
As he turns away blows just simply with his own force of will.
He is pretty awesome in that way.
And parrying.
Yes, and there's very few 3-up invuls in the game. I think there's 2 off the cuff. And this guy also, when he's charging, he critical hits more often, so his sustained hits trigger more frequently, and he can choose to go with a bunch of strength 6 AP 1 damage attacks, or a smaller number of 2 damage attacks with a greater AP and a greater strength. I'm guessing he's chosen Isirmathil for his swings here because he's going after guardsmen as opposed to bigger prey.
Stark, gefällt mir. Gefällt mir richtig gut, Karandras. Karandras und Striking Scorpions gefallen mir richtig gut. Jeder, der mich kennt, weiß, ich bin ja eh ein Fan von denen. Und gefällt mir richtig, richtig, richtig gut. Jungs. Shadowhunter plus 1 to hit auf Striking Scorpions. Mit der Fähigkeit Guide, voll Hit Rerolls. Exploding Sixes, weil sie haben beide Sustained Hits. Karandras sogar auf den 4-5. Und dann noch Devastating Wounds. Diese Einheit blendet sich durch den Infanterie durch.
There are some guardsmen left, it looks like. Some of them survived.
Aber anscheinend keine 20.
Scorpions. It looks like, certainly, I'm going to guess, we've got the platoon commander right here. We've got the medic. Yeah, it's definitely a medic. There's a medipack.
Yeah, it's
and
like
we've got a
the
primary
last to be
psyker.
removed.
So we probably got some good work from that medic to save a few guys who got in the way as they went down. And
this is going to be pretty brutal on the battle shock.
They will have to take a battle shock test.
Yep.
We'll talk about battle shock a fair bit when we get down to it. But of course, the battle shock test for a squad that's led by a platoon commander and by a primary psyker. We might see how they try and return their punishment.
Bin immer gespannt, was da jetzt
They're in a
passiert.
terrible spot, though. Yeah, I mean,
they don't want to be in the situation that they're in. That's certainly true.
But it's not irredeemable. I mean, you're over there still into the Astra Militarum lines. You can see that the vehicle's there. It wouldn't take much to get that flamer happening on the Striking Scorpions, some Wyverns on the Striking Scorpions.
They're still working. Those wounds are still being allocated, it looks like. So the medic has, and the primary psyker has reached the end of the line. Did we survive with just one platoon commander standing amongst his fallen? Is that how it's going, basically?
It looks like it.
Oh,
Maybe
he's
just
rolling his last
keeping
saves.
us in suspense. That does not do it. That doesn't do it.
It didn't do it.
Sie haben sich
There
ganz
we go.
aufgeregt.
I think he was probably deciding, do I want to spend some extra resources
They want
on
to
this?
reroll CPs or anything like that, but ultimately the Scorpions did what they do best. They blended infantry.
Hätte mich jetzt auch stark
And,
überrascht.
well, that's that. There's the charge that's happened there. So, I mean, it's a pretty big turn for the Aeldari in terms of what it looks like on the battlefield. Now, what we do know is that Andrew has a whole bunch of additional models who are in reserve. He has a whole bunch of Tauroxes who've got additional infantry in them still. He's also got a...
Did any of those Sentinels explode?
no explosions?
No explosions. We're going to count these as part of our explosion count.
As part of the explosion count for the event?
Yep.
All right. So, now we're going to see morale. But before we get to the battle shock phase, we're going to see the morale and its impact on Andrew as a player. So he took a punch back here this turn.
That is so important, obviously. Basically
is.
rolling with the punches. Seeing, although that worked out wirklich. I was going to
Wild, was
predict
da
there would be
passiert ist.
0 cards left.
Wir haben jetzt die Guard gesehen, die haben diesen
Raiders
aggressiven Guardzug
and
zurückgeschlagen.
Scorpions.
Wir haben hier die Mission gesehen.
When that happens, you expect it to happen.
Die Mission ist quasi, ich muss diese Mittelmarker bewegen, wenn ich sie am Ende meines Zuges kontrolliere und kann sie dann eben 6 Zoll bewegen und ich kriege Punkte, wenn sie in der gegnerischen Aufstellungszone sind oder nahe davon.
You're looking at a
Sprich,
world
man
without
verliert
fives.
Punkte, wenn man
Yeah,
sie
we're also
nicht,
looking at a world where Scout
wenn
Sentinels
der
are
Gegner sie
returning
auf
to
einen
the battlefield thanks to their
zufährt,
stratagem
dann
to
kann
come
man sie
back to
quasi
life.
nicht gut punkten.
We're also looking at a world
Your
where there's
radio
wilde
wave
Mission,
reinforcements.
a whole bunch
Finde ich
more
die geil, weiß
Kriegers
ich
are
nicht.
still on the battlefield.
Was ich auf
So
jeden Fall cool finde,
Andrew
sind die
still has a
Striking
full
Scorpions.
20-man squad here.
Die
He has
legen auf
a
jeden Fall
number
richtig,
of
richtig zu.
other 10-man squads that have, so I think it's 3 other 10-man squads. So he lost 10 guardsmen, 10 here, and 20 here.
Hier sehen wir ein neues Stratagem.
He lost 2 sentinels, but they came
Damit
back.
kann er ganze Einheiten
And
wieder
so
zurückbringen.
ultimately, the pain of that turn for Andrew was a couple of light vehicles, 30 guardsmen.
Starke
It's
Secondary.
his turn to swing back.
Let's break down the anatomy of this stratagem as well. So
Das sehen wir aber
the
schon ein paar Mal,
reinforcements
dass man
up.
wieder
Yeah, we talked
Einheiten
about this before,
zurückbringen
but if you're
kann,
just joining us
Regen
on
für
the
diese
chat,
ganzen
you've guys basically
Battle
got the
Line
who, what, when,
Units.
where, and why right there on the stratagem, so you don't have to guess.
Indeed, and we'll pull that stratagem up. We're gonna get that reinforcement stratagem up on the screen. Oh, it popped off. It's all right. The tech priest is over there talking with our North American events guy Ryan Schwartz, himself an Eldari player. He can't help but come over and talk about how these Eldari are doing. The reinforcements here is the stratagem that was used on those Scout Sentinels. So Scout Sentinels are one of the few vehicle units in their index who have the regiment keyword. And thus, while he could have saved it for some of those infantry who got blended, he instead
Only in a rerun
brought back some of those
Du
Scout
kannst
Sentinels.
Sentinels
They come back with fresh
zurückbringen.
killer missiles because the unit is returned as it began. No characters come back, but he's got the ability to
3
keep
Sentinels
organizing
wieder
those newer
reingebracht.
Eldari units. In the meantime, he's
Richtig,
gonna have to
richtig
figure out what to
stark.
do about those striking scorpions.
You know, in this, I want to the anatomy here. When you can do it anytime you want, any phase of the game. Target, one regiment. The effect tells you what it does, and then if there's any restrictions, you got it right there. All right there, plain as day. That is this is not something a graphic for just the stream. That is how it's going to appear when you see it.
Really, kind of an improvement in the overall quality of life, how the rules are written, right? And as we found the evolution of the hobby as a whole, more and more people are gamers these days, and more people understandably expect a game that is written in a very modern way. And so we see an evolution of things like timing and the clarity of mechanics. And again,
Richtig
amazing
wild.
designer's commentary folks will see alongside the rules for all those
Einfach 3
curiosity
Sentinels
questions
wieder
around the edges
zurückgestellt.
and fringes of the rules to help make sure they're all
Kommen jetzt aus der strategischen Reserve. Das heißt, innerhalb von 6 Zoll von einer der Spielfeldkanten inzwischen jetzt jeder. Und wir sind in Runde 2, das heißt nicht in der Aufstellungszone von Nick, das ist unten links.
North of the wall saying,
Wo jetzt quasi das Stratagem eingeblendet
going to
ist.
be something that you plan on
Wunderbar.
doing. It's like how you interact with the game. The strategic nature of it is still
Aber halt
there.
oben, links, rechts.
walk over to those servo skulls and
Richtig
push
stark.
it in a certain direction, isn't it?
It's risk versus reward, but I'm saying that's the type of stuff that's still a function of the game, even though it's simpler but not simple. So you still have to play this game. You're going to see all these new things kind of unfold, new options for you, and you got to make those choices.
Exactly. So,
Wildes Ding.
did get some points for Bring It Down. He killed 3 Scout Sentinels, it looks like, over the course of the turn, as well as Torox. So that should get him, he should be getting an 8 points for Bring It Down, and he did, in fact, max Bring It Down in that turn.
Actually discarded the other one to get a command point.
So he chose not to deploy teleport homers, and he discarded it because if you discard any number of tactical objectives at the end of the turn, which is when you can discard them, you get 1 command point. Whether or not you don't get 1 per, so if you discard 2, you don't get 2 command points. But if you discard any, you get a command point. You don't draw new ones until your command phase, so we'll see how that goes for Nick. But Nick is definitely building up some command points, and he has quite a few clever stratagems of his own after Aeldari. And have that. There's Fire and Fade, which lets you move after shooting. That's
Pretty
2
useful.
CP. He also has Phantasm, which is an incredibly powerful ability.
We showed Phantasm earlier, but it probably good to bring it up.
Das hat er
again.
richtig verstanden.
Phantasm, because Nick is definitely setting himself up to have the ability to
Du
Overwatch.
kannst Karten abwerfen und dann
for
kriegst du
having the
Command
ability
Points.
to Phantasm, he's saving
Ist
up
okay.
those CP.
Das ist ein Grund,
Burning
die
chances to
Tactical
score victory
Objectives zu
points,
spielen.
though, in order to build up those command points. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the course of the game. So, Phantasm. Oh, that's 20 and 10. I just got there sitting on there. Phantasm happens at the end of your opponent's movement phase. You pick 1 Eldari unit, and it moves up to 7 inches. Can't disembark as part of this, or can't embark into a transport as part of this. But it's quite interesting because you can do some really creative moves with move blocking, for instance, and then waiting until your opponent's turn is done, and then move back. Of course, Phantasm is a perfect name for it. It's a shift, though, from the Phantasm of the past, which in the current edition lets you redeploy units at the beginning of the game.
Phantasm ist ein starkes Secondary. Starkes Strategy.
Nothing for the Eldari army is
Einfach
currently
Bewegung in der
reserved. FYI,
gegnerischen
that was a question that was
Aufstellungszone,
asked
in der
stream,
gegnerischen
so
Bewegungsphase
everything
ist
the
richtig
Eldari have on
stark.
the battlefield, but Andrew does have strategic reinforcements in the form of Tauroxes that will likely show up this turn. We've got one of them on the battlefield up here. That's got some
he is feeling like he's got to regain his presence on the tabletop.
He's going to have to, because Nick is starting to push these objectives. Nick, however, did not seem to push this objective back.
There's a lot going on in this game.
Last turn, did Nick leave that objective where it was? And
Center one?
the one on they've got the square around, did it
I don't see anyone over there.
stay where it was that turn? Tech Breeze Warner.
He has surrounded that one there to the south.
Oh, he just didn't move it directly back to where it was? So, Nick is doing some interesting things with objective movement here. So, he's chosen, in the case of this objective, not to move it back to where it started at. So, it's actually still closer than not to his deployment zone. So, potentially risking some points there by not moving it further. However, he's been very creative in this area of the battlefield, because one of the things I was hoping they would figure out about this mission very quickly is he moved past it with his Viper, so that even though he doesn't score it in Andrew's turn, he can still move his objectives that he still controls in both turns. So he's moved the objective the full 6 inches, but because his Viper was past it, it's still within control range of that Viper. So Andrew's going to have to put some models there, or else it's going to move again.
Ich weiß noch nicht so 100%, ob ich das gut finde, wie die Marker und die Missionen jetzt funktionieren.
Those models right there, right in the
Creative
open.
play. I love people using the creative elements and rules of a game to actually play some really clever, fun, interesting things with these missions. And we've really worked hard to make for missions that are engaging and encourage creativity. Sort of some of that chess-like play in a strategy game, because what could be better than that?
Can one unit move 2 objectives?
A unit could, I guess, if you got them really close to each other.
And I think that's what Nick actually pushed that one more towards the center.
He's trying to kind of collect them.
So potentially limiting where he has to be.
Of course, the challenge that creates for Nick is if we bisect the battlefield, basically, by not moving it back to the center line where it started, because he pushed it to the right some, it is technically within 12 inches of his deployment zone. And so this turn, even if Andrew doesn't move it again, it's going to give some points to Andrew. So that's an important part of how this play works. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the rest
That's risky.
of the battle. It is risky, and this is one of the things that's interesting, is Nick is trying to be creative and thinking ahead about where he eventually wants that objective to be, but in the process, he's risking some points in the meantime. And Andrew's going to have a good turn here to come back from how it went early on.
Got to request to see the warp spiders.
Well, we got to wait for the warp spiders to do something crazy, which they can and will do. So we're going to hold off on that. We're going to keep you guys guessing about how the warp spiders work, because remember last turn they got hung up in combat by those sacrificial scout sentinels, which slowed down Nick's turn. Although Nick's turn was pretty good on the anti-infantry.
And I do think he's held him back too, because he's kind of banking on Andrew, going to have some things coming in from reserve. Didn't know exactly where they're going to be yet. So yeah, keeping them in a position where they're not overly committed to one area or the other on the battlefield.
Yep. Now, one of Nick's moves to keep his units within range of the objective may actually backfire here on him, because Servo Skulls allows you to potentially control an objective, score points on your own from it, and then get rid of it. Get it out of the picture. However, he has some objectives near him, and can I get a confirmation from the battlefield as to whether or not that bottom right Servo Skull is still under Nick's control? Does he still have units within 3 inches of it? Because if it does, what we're going to find here...
It looks like it.
It does. So what we're going to find is that the 2 secondaries that Ganyo drew this turn are no prisoners and overwhelming force, which are all about killing things. Is he still within 3 inches of 2? Or only 1? Give us the update, Tech Priest.
All right, so on that bottom right one, Andrew actually advanced Rattlings onto it and avoided the Overwatch. He was able to clear it on both the beginning and the end of the movement.
So these are Rattlings?
Those are Rattlings.
Sorry, not Rattlings. So those are Rattlings that are right there. So is that objective currently controlled by Andrew then?
Yes.
Ah. So that's an interesting play. So Andrew's got overwhelming force and no prisoners. No prisoners is going to earn Andrew points for killing enemy units. He gets 2 per unit up to a max of 5. So if he kills 3 units, he gets 5 points. If he kills 1 unit, he gets 2. Additionally, he's got the ability here to score points for killing enemy units that are within range of an objective marker. They don't have to control that objective marker, though. Does Nick have any units still within 3 inches?
2 Secondaries, die du wieder nicht nehmen kannst, weil sie haben unten diese Datenblätter nicht.
So.
If he doesn't, then
heißt, die
Nick has
kannst du nur
saved
ziehen?
himself from the potential of giving up points. However, if he does, and one of those units is destroyed, that would give some additional points to Andrew.
So a lot of activity there on that section of the board, I think is what we're saying.
Yep, killing that Viper in the middle is going to be important because if he kills that Viper controlling that middle objective, that's going to give him 3 what? All right, so the opportunities on the board then for Andrew, if he can kill that Viper in the middle, he'll get 3 points, and these how these tactical objectives work. And, of course, Nick could Phantasm out of the way. This chat has the clever chat, figuring these things out immediately. Nick saved himself up quite a few command points by discarding his opportunity to score points last turn. And he could save one of those to move his Viper away from controlling that objective before it gets killed in the shooting phase.
Getting that fuel for the stratagems, I think, is a pretty good move there.
Pretty brilliant, and denying Andrew the chance to overwhelmingly force it.
Man kann Karten abwerfen für Command Points. Finde ich jetzt auch etwas seltsam. Aber das macht diese Command Points doch wieder nicht so besonders, wenn du Karten hast. Du ziehst halt eine Karte, die schlecht ist, wirfst die ab, kriegst Command Points.
Yeah, I mean, granted, you know, we roll the dice for a reason. Anything can happen, but I think he's definitely going to be in a situation to where he can pick up some of these Aeldari.
And it's a fascinating thing. I remember I was you know, trying to keep an eye on the stream and the opinions. This game again is a no-holds-barred game. You know, sometimes games go pear-shaped, sometimes they go to the fine wire, and I think with these players, the fine wire is most likely. But again, these are 2 of the best-known players on the planet as far as tournament players go. They're 2 of the nicest guys on the planet, and they are very familiar with each other. Also, Nick is trying to break a losing streak against Andrew. Tell us about it, Paul.
That is true. Yeah, they've actually been playing for a long time, and even they've even said that no matter what, typically Andrew figures out a way to beat Nick. Even specifically Nick, even if he struggled against some of the other players at the time, he's always figured out a way to beat Nick. So it's basically
Wir sind Top of 2 und wir haben schon 1 Stunde 30 gespielt. Also schneller ist das Spiel auf gar keinen Fall. Holy moly.
Nick in his prime, one of the better-known players.
Also sie müssen natürlich viel nachlesen. Die Frage ist halt, ja, die spielen natürlich auch ein bisschen langsamer, als man das erwarten müsste, ne? Weil die auch nicht genau wissen, wie funktioniert es, die Mechaniken und sowas. Und die wollen den Stream natürlich auch nicht so schnell beenden. Trotzdem ein bisschen nervig, dass sie jetzt Turn 2 sind. Ich will eigentlich die Datenblätter sehen.
They can also typically use their rifles with precise precision.
They do have precision weapons. They actually have a slightly better sniper rifle.
Ah, Redlings, wieder eine Einheit. 5 Modelle, Stealth Infiltrators, sehr cool, -1 to hit, gegen Ranged Attacks.
They're quite fragile. At toughness 2, they have very little in the way of saves. So they're very, if you
können nochmal einen Move machen, wenn, nachdem die geschossen haben. Das ist cool. 6 Zoll Bewegung haben die jetzt, flinke Füße für so kleine Kerle. Sniper Rifle ist Stärke 4 -2-2. Wow! Heavy. Geile Waffe. Oh, sind die gut. Andi, wenn du das nachschaust und diesen Stamper anschaust. Hey.
Rangers, faster, sneakier, actually a little bit more durable or better at taking advantage.
Dafür halten sie halt nichts aus, ne? Toughness 2, 6er Save.
33% tougher.
T3 is still T3. I'm not going to say that's a huge difference between them.
Ja, jetzt sehen wir hier den Vergleich zu den Rangern.
Move in response to an enemy movement. And they have a similar rifle, but with -1 AP instead of -2. Rattling snipers, definitely a lot more fragile. Similar infiltrators, they have the ability to shoot and move if they're not engagement range. That shoot, sharp, and scarper, old school ability of the Rattling snipers, and a slightly harder hitting sniper rifle in the process.
I like that. And the damage too on this, you know, I love to see it. I think that's gonna actually be effective.
Gefällt mir. Sniper sind gut. Brauchst du auch. Kriegst die kleinen Trupps raus, kriegst die kleinen Typen raus.
Save, not getting the benefit of cover. Toughness 2. Basically everything a stiff breeze.
Yeah.
Certainly everything in the Aeldari arsenal.
Survival is not really their cup of tea. In the meantime, we've got the Torox that has advanced. I think it's kept its cargo inside in order to move that other objective because Andrew's staying focused on that primary, as one must do, and trying to take advantage a little bit about Nick's choice not to move that objective right back to where it started from. So we might actually find...
That is part of, you know, trying to find your legs with the systems, you know, playing the mission for the first time. Kicking those objectives towards something that's manageable for you. I think later in the game you have to expect that you're going to have fewer models and would prefer to not be as spread out as maybe you think you might want to be on the table.
Exactly. We also have an interesting situation going on here for Nick in that he does have the ability to turn 1 dice per turn, player turn, into a 6, but he's very low on fate dice and he doesn't have any native 6s left in his fate pool. So Nick is trying to manage that resource, and while he can turn 1/6, he doesn't have nearly the scary auto-overwatching Bright Lances that he had before. He could do it once, but he can only do it once. And then they wouldn't have necessarily the same dice pool to guarantee damage after the fact. So he's burned a lot of fate dice in a turn. I'm curious how he's going to play out with that Paul over the course of this turn. And Andrew's able to take a few more risks with his vehicles now because there's less fate dice there waiting to snipe him the moment he exposes
fate dice
himself.
are a luxury. They definitely are a luxury. You can kind of manifest your own luck by looking at the strands of fate. But you know, you can still roll the dice.
Yeah, absolutely true. Now, Paul, can you carry this on for just a second as I cover off something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, rolling the dice. You know, again, but you want to try to reduce that variance. That's what you're trying to do. Is like you have to figure out a way. To make sure that
Die Sentinels, die ihr jetzt da rechts seht, die reinkommen, die sind wiederbelebt worden mit dem Stratagem Reinforcements. Damit kannst du eine Regiment-Unit, die zerstört wurde, wieder reinbringen. Du kannst in Any Phase benutzen, also in deiner Command-Phase. Dann geht die strategische Reserve und kann dann in der Runde auch direkt kommen. Nicht in der ersten, klar, aber in der zweiten. Und das kann er natürlich nutzen. Das kann er jede Runde benutzen. Das ist nicht nur uns per Game, sondern er kann immer wieder die Einheit zurückholen. Starkes Ding. Kostet 2 Command Points. Jetzt denkt man, das ist viel, aber solange Lord Solar Leontos hier oben in der Mitte lebt, kriegt er am Anfang seines Zuges immer 2 Command Points. Stark.
That's going to be a bit of a problem because, well, it won't score in his turn. That is deep in his side of the board, and Nick has a lot of mobility to try and get up there. It's going to be interesting to see.
He's definitely moving those guardsmen up. He's like, you know what? We got las guns. We're going to bring all kind of shots on these striking scorpions. Although they're going to be there hanging out, they have good armor, going to be getting the benefit of cover, I believe. Being able to improve that armor save. Well, actually, maybe not. They have a 3+ armor save.
Who has a 3?
Striking Scorpions, are they 3+ or 4+?
Striking Scorpions have a 3+ armor save, so the cover does not improve their save any further.
There we go.
That's the nature of that beast.
Yep.
So, we've got a situation here. You know, I think it might be time to look at one of the big bonuses this unit has in the form of the Platoon Command Squad. So,
look at all those coming out
his
there.
His second big blob. He's lost the first one to the Striking Scorpions, but he's moved this big old squad there. They're probably getting in position. Yeah, they're gonna shoot at or potentially even charge those Striking Scorpions. Nick can't phantasm both units. And this is going to be really important because the Platoon Command Squad is what helps drive this unit and its functionality to go beyond what it normally would do. So, we've got a unit that moves 6 inches,
Command Squad.
Of course, just like any other unit.
Sehr cool.
It's able to join, and you can see
Nieder,
it's able to join
kann sich
Jungle Fighters, Infantry Squads, Deathcore Creek. There's a Cadian Command Squad for joining Cadian units. And
also das ist der normale Platoon Command Squad.
Kann
es schwere Waffen mitnehmen?
That is good. Battle Shock is actually going to be a huge
Heavy Bolter, Last Gun.
Now look, as we're playing what we
Grenade Launcher, Flamer, Sniper Rifle.
You know, highly competitive, all the fat trimmed or whatever. Players are going
to try to
mitigate that Battle Shock, but it's still going to happen.
Battle Shock does happen. It's a whole thing that when it happens in this game, we'll probably talk about it at length or ad nauseum to see what the impact is.
Okay, du kannst Platoon-Units in 6 Zoll Umkreis kannst du noch mit Battleshock mit Stratagem verwenden, wenn du Battleshock hast. Du hast 24 Zoll Order Ranges, du hast ein Medipack, 6er Feel No Pain, cool. Plus 1 Objective Control. Das ist stark. Wenn du bedenkst, dass du so 20er Einheiten hast, dann nimmst du Marker nicht so schnell weg.
The metapack's in the unit, which gives that 6 of Feel No Pain ability, and the regimental standard is in the unit. So the unit actually has an OC of 2 on every single guardsman, or 3 on every single guardsman, and an OC of 2 in these. And here's an interesting thing for you. I'm going to give you guys a snippet from that designer's commentary. It helps clarify the ordering of operations when you're doing math in the game. So, any ability that sets a value before modifiers goes first. So, for instance, if you fail your Battle Shock test.
Okay.
Failing a Battle Shock test sets your OC at 0. Next comes division, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction. So this regimental standard is not only one that makes the unit really great at taking objectives, it is quite powerful because if they fail their Battle Shock test, the regimental standard will then subsequently still add 1 to their OC and make them control an objective.
Stark.
If they could do that,
was die jetzt gerade erklärt haben, ist ein Designers Commentary. Wie Set Values, Additions und sowas funktionieren. Das ist wichtig. Ich versuche das jetzt mal zu übersetzen für euch. Und zwar funktioniert das so, wenn du funktionieren Modifier in der Reihenfolge. Als erstes kommt das Set Value. Das heißt, du verpasst einen Battleshock Test, dein Objective Control wird auf 2 gesetzt. Dann wird subtrahiert, dann wird multipliziert, dann wird addiert und dann wird subtrahiert. Das heißt, Wenn das Banner, wie wir jetzt hier gesehen haben, +1 auf den Objective Control Wert gibt, dann macht die Battleshocked Einheit, geht auf Objective Control 0 und kriegt durch das Banner Objective Control 1. Das ist richtig stark. Das ist richtig, richtig gut. Weil normalerweise hast du bei Battleshock... Servus Stefan, schön, dass du zuschaust. So früh schon wach. Ich bin jetzt hier schon 2 Stunden am Stream. Ja, wie gesagt, was wir jetzt hier auch gesehen haben, ist ein Benutzen vom Stratagem der Elder Phantasm. Und zwar haben sich die Striking Scorpions jetzt 7 Zoll aus dem Haus rausbewegt, aus der Sichtlinie. Das passiert am Ende der Movement Phase.
The reason we use the acrylics here at the opens and whatnot is because these beautiful mats have quite the aesthetic. They work and blend in with the terrain itself. And call it personal preference, but sometimes, you know, people will put like big old cardboard bases or something underneath their terrain, and it, you know, will kind of break up the aesthetic of that board or the terrain itself. So we use those acrylics because they help us identify the outline of a piece of terrain.
For the stream, though, sometimes the lights don't always pick up the glare.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
No, that's okay. I'd rather the players get the functionality and us explain it to the viewers, just in case.
All right, the Viper has gone down, so that's going to be several points for Andrew. He's going to score both of his secondaries off that. So overwhelming force, he's going to get 3 points for having killed a unit that is near an objective, and he's also going to get 2 points for killing a unit with no prisoners, and potentially more if he can kill more units this turn for no prisoners during this turn. So we'll see how that goes for Andrew. That's a good play. He had to get rid of that Viper anyway. He has to control that objective, which he currently does with at least 1 model. And now Andrew moves on to his next priority, which... Well,
Striking Scorpions.
Scorpions got to die, or
I
else
do think that they're priority number 1. Now look, it's we never second guess the player, of course, the pilot. The pilot knows what's there. They're in the thick of it. They are they can't hear us either, you know, most of the time. But they actually know, you know, they're typically more comfortable with their army.
Wir sehen jetzt ein bisschen
They can't hear
indirektes
us, but
Feuer.
if Warner were to mute me, they might be able to hear us.
And they have their agenda, you know, already planned out. So we're, you know, I don't want to second guess what the pilot does, but I do think those Striking Scorpions are priority number 1 right now.
Hey, Nick and Andrew, Scream say you guys are bad.
That's right with the Striking Scorpions. We saw what devastation that they have wrought on the infantry, and he doesn't want to have that happen again. So I think it's got to be on his mind to do something about it.
And we'll see what happens. So, people are asking for that Warp Spider. You're going to have to wait. You never know when we're going to show you the next data sheet. And there's a whole bunch we haven't shown yet, right? What have we not shown? So we've shown the Windrunner. We haven't shown the Warp Spiders. We haven't shown the Storm Guardians.
We haven't shown the Viper.
We haven't shown the Viper. We haven't shown... Don't show any of these yet, Tech Priest. We're going to keep...
Yep,
Sorry. Part of our job is to keep you guys in suspense and, you know, interrupt that with occasional commentary about the game.
Jetzt machen sie sich über uns lustig.
Oh, okay.
Die Leute wollen im Chat Warp Spiders sehen und nö, die warten. Die warten, bis die Warp Spiders eingesetzt werden. Die haben schon 1, 2 Sachen geteasert, und zwar haben die Warp Spiders anscheinend Torrent, das heißt Auto-Hits, und die haben Devastating Roots.
A new Meta Chaser.
Storm Guardians.
Storm Guardians are very... I think there's a reason he has Storm Guardians instead of Defenders.
I already have a bunch of heavy weapons. I'm just rebasing.
I have a bunch too. Like I said, I've been a guard player. No. And I'm going to call him the guard, dang it.
Because I have previously chased the meta.
Yeah, we're retired Meta Chasers here. One-time member of Team America, Mike. One-time Blood Angel good player, Paul.
Listen to this.
Once.
See what I have to put on with chat.
Both of us talking about what we're going to do in the future.
I like projects like this. I like the opportunity to revisit models that maybe you painted a long time ago. You know, bring them up to modern standards. You know, we're all on a path of hobby.
I want to know. We have a bunch of people in the stream. We have a bunch of people watching. A bunch of people taking screenshots and posting it on Reddit as soon as we show a new data sheet. Thank you for bearing with our desire to string you along. But what's everybody's current paint project? It's one of those things that we don't really ask often. And you guys are sitting here watching and listening to us as we talk about this crazy new edition. But tell us about you a little bit, because we're looking at it.
Also ich muss jetzt sagen, die Edition spielt sich auf jeden Fall schon so ein bisschen wie die alte Edition, wenn man das so sieht. Ich meine, was ist nicht so grundlegend anders? Du hast Würfel, du hast Trefferwürfel, du hast Verwundungswürfel, du hast eine Bewegungsphase, dann sind einfach nur ein paar Werte anders und einzelne Rahmenbedingungen. Das ist für den erfahrenen Spieler. Oh, jetzt explodiert der Chat gerade ein bisschen. Halleluja, hat Nick da gerade seine Würfel ausgepackt. Das sind das 6 Fails aus 8 Würfeln?
I don't know. I'm almost speechless, Paul, and that's not a thing that happens to me a lot. Speeches are one of my things. But what in the world do we do?
Look, they aren't going to rebase themselves.
They're not going to rebase themselves.
No,
That's
look,
true.
I'm telling you, sometimes you get to things like, oh, I really want to have them on this battlefield, or I just made some terrain. I wanted to match my display board. You get inspired to do things.
I feel like we need to prep like a massive amount of a couple of particular contrast paints and maybe some
Was wir jetzt gerade sehen, sind die Wyverns, die schießen.
A little technical paint for those new bases.
Faces and bases. I'm a big fan of
Da gibt es eine Sonderregel, wenn eine Einheit Scout Sentinels die Einheit sieht, dann kriegt die Artillerie Reroll 1 to Hit und ignoriert die Modifier. Stefan, ich bin auch gespannt auf die Punktkosten. Mit dem steht und fällt alles. Was wir auf der Elder-Seite sehen, ist bei 2000 Punkten, ich kann noch kurz die Liste durchgehen, wie die am Anfang aussah, damit man ein Gefühl hat, es sind 3 Vipers, ein Warwalker, 2 Fire Prism, ein Wave Serpent, eine 5er-Einheit Windrider, ein Warlock auf Bike, ein Farseer auf Bike, Storm Guardians, zweimal Warp Spiders, 2 Shadow Weaver und Karandras plus 10 Dire Avengers und ich glaube Azurman ist auch mit dabei bei den Dire Avengers. Also es sieht so ein bisschen aus wie eine Armee jetzt auch. Die Panzer sind ja immer ein bisschen teuer. Aber wir sehen auf jeden Fall die Fire Prisms, richtig starke Einheit. Aber wir sehen auch das Terrain Layout hier, was ich vielleicht auch mal erwähnen sollte. Das Terrain Layout ist eher so ein bisschen dense. Diese Acrylplatten, die ihr hier seht, sind, glaube ich, ein bisschen schwer zu erkennen, aber die sind da, die Ruinen haben quasi alle ein Base und diese Bases blocken Sichtlinien. Das sind große Ls, die aneinander gestellt wurden. Was mir aber so ein bisschen Sorge bereitet im Moment ist der Artilleriebeschuss. Man sitzt also quasi die ganze Zeit da und der Guard hat da hinten seine Burg und schießt da raus und der einzige Weg, der in Aeldar ist da hinzurennen und die zu taggen oder zu töten. Gleichzeitig passiert viel in der Mitte. Wir haben den Basilisten schon gesehen, der hat noch AP2, kein Cover oder Kriegscover. Das heißt, der tötet jetzt auch nicht so viel, hat nur Stärke 8, Fahrzeuge macht er nicht kaputt, Infanterie macht er kaputt. Also ich glaube, es wird auf jeden Fall durch den indirekten Beschuss eher eine Fahrzeugedition. Transporter sind relevant, du gehst raus.
Thousand Suns player over there, Tech Priest Warner, is as heretical as it gets. Anywho, he did ruin everything.
I love this though. My local Warhammer store started a painting league.
Really?
Awesome. No, not me. Someone in chat.
Oh well, maybe you should start a painting league
Maybe
as well, Warner. Be inspired by the people in chat. They're better than us. So,
the hobby accountability is huge. That's why I post some pictures on the internet. Somebody's like, finish that, but nobody says finish that. But it's encouraging to finish.
I mean, maybe we're watching a guard player, an order or a commissarial kind of a dictate might be a good way to get a bunch of painting done. Get it done, or else pistols are usable in combat. All right, so we've distracted you guys and bought some time for ourselves to ponder what's happening here in the game. Because a lot of firepower is going. There's a whole bunch of shooting going on. The Dire Avengers are getting smacked around by the... This is really interesting. Andrew's choosing not to really shoot at the Scorpions at all. He has laid into, so far, those Wind Riders. It looks like the Wind Riders are basically down except for the characters. He has laid into the Dire Avengers to get rid of most of that really powerful anti-infantry firepower. He's left those Scorpions alive so far, so maybe he has some shooting left. There's some indirects still to go, and the Viper is dead, so that's good for Andrew. It's really interesting to me to see what's going to happen here because this is a problem for the Lord Solar Commander.
Maybe he thinks he can solve it with some Overwatch, or maybe he's not worried about it. Got a question here, and you might have an opinion on this too. Is what do I think about the Lamenters?
What do you think about the Lamenters?
I think the Lamenters are awesome, but that their whole lore is basically like I think they came from the Curse Founding.
Diese zwei Kommentatoren. Übrigens ist Nix Armee nicht Battle Ready. Die seine Viper nicht bemalt ist. Geil auf dem GW-Stream. Aber man muss dazu sagen, es wurde einfach gesagt, was für Armeen habt ihr dabei? Und dann haben die sich schnell zusammengegrabt, was relativ cool ist, das darzustellen.
Imperial Fist.
The products make it a little easier now. Like
that's true.
the base paints and the primer make it a little.
Fassi und Warlock da hinten sind noch übrig. Wir haben ein paar Warp Spiders, da unten ist Azurman, der einen Dreier-Retter hat. Wildes Ding. Der Wave-Serpent, der durch den indirekten Beschuss in der ersten Runde schon auf 3 Lebenspunkte runtergeprügelt wurde. Was indirekter Beschuss oder waren es die Sentinels? Ich kann es nicht genau sagen. Hat aber seinen Job eigentlich getan.
We're not going to wow you with anything that we're painting, but we're in the trenches with all you other painters. We're there trying to make our armies look as nice as we can, as battle ready as we can, as beautiful as we can, without, at the end of it, showing off and going, oh man, I'm just an okay painter. When you look at it, and you're like, oh, well, I'm never going to be that good.
Der Warwalker hat eine Shuriken-Kanone, der Wave-Serpent hat eine Shuriken-Kanone, aber es sind alles Bright Lances. Ich habe einen Wave-Serpent gebaut mit 2 Bright Lances. Ich glaube, das ist der Weg to go.
Look at Golden Demon painting, they're very good.
A lot of what those painters will tell you is that, like, how did you do this? It's like, well, I spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
But back to the game here. But I want to point out that all these like hobby experiments and that kind of stuff, the products make it a heck of a lot easier to be better.
Aber hier seht ihr auch diese Acrylplatten ganz gut.
Hier
wieder verwendet.
Because the materials are better.
That's very true.
Das sind normalerweise 12×12. So wie das hier aussieht, sind das 6×12 Platten. Ich denke mal, das wird auch so weitergehen, dass diese Layouts so verwendet werden. Das sorgt natürlich schon für dichtes Gelände.
Interesting mechanic of new 40k that came up here. Both of those characters were attached to that Wind Rider unit, if you remember. The Wind Riders are all gone, so these 2 leaders are now separate character models, independent units of their own.
Ah, that's a really good point.
Das ist cool. Was die jetzt gerade erklärt haben, ist auch wieder so eine Game-Mechanik. Und zwar diese 2 Bikes, die ihr da im Bild seht, die waren vorher einer Windrider-Einheit angeschlossen. Und die Windrider-Einheit ist tot. Und jetzt sind die beiden nicht mehr eine Einheit, sondern 2 einzelne. Das ist cool, jetzt hast du dann quasi deine einzelnen Charaktere. Die können sich auch keiner neuen Einheit mehr anschließen, sondern die laufen jetzt quasi einfach alleine rum. Aber du kannst nicht mit einer Salve dann quasi nochmal reinhalten, sondern musst dann aufteilen.
And it's a charge, so Andrew has decided to rely on... I mean, this is an interesting play by Andrew. He's got quite a lot of effort that he's thought through this turn, and he can't do much about the Warp Spiders, and I think we're going to see them come into play this turn. But he got rid of the Avengers, which were the biggest threat to his infantry with shooting, so that volume of firepower is gone.
Man, I guess.
And with only...
Ich habe fast das Gefühl, das Match ist gescriptet.
There's 9 wounds of Scorpions left. So they have T3. There's a total of 9 wounds between Karandras and... the Exarch with 2 wounds and the other surviving Scorpions. And he's hoping the weight of attacks from his Death Corps can tip the balance, tip the scales a little bit.
There are a lot of models there.
He's got to try to get Leontis into base contact with one of the base contacts as well to make sure Leontis... So it'd be interesting to see whether Andrew blocks himself off here.
I don't know if he rolled enough range. I think Leontis is going to be
He's making a gap, though. So see what Andrew's doing. He's adjusting his charge because he's going to get that 3-inch pylon in it.
Let's talk about how
I'd say almost certainly he's gonna be able to get.
Sind wir Nahkampf in Aktion? Also Nahkampf halt mit einer größeren Einheit.
Base to base with the enemy models, or you've got to be in base to base with one of your models is in base with the enemy model.
Andrew's moving a little quickly here, but these models do have to get into base contact if they pylon at all, and they can get into base, so they're gonna have to move up there a little bit. And it's gonna get this model in base is the key because if Andrew can touch there, which it looks like 3 inches.
This is a fundamental change to the current edition of the game. How you move the models around.
Da ist auch ganz viel Taktik drin, wie ich wann welche Modelle bewege, wann welche Modelle wo basen müssen und wie ich die Reihenfolge dann mache. Das ist eine richtig große Änderung und da kann man das Spiel immer noch meistern.
Prior editions has been the fact that you can use the combat movement rules to do some creative things to get the units you need to get to where you need to get them to. But it's just a little bit tighter and a little bit more intuitive now. You're rarely going to see situations. You might see situations where units move toward a target.
Was natürlich auch spannend ist bei so einer großen Einheit, wenn du so große Base-Modelle da anbringen kannst, also jetzt mal als hypothetischer Fall. Du kannst irgendwelche Modelle mit so einer Base wie Leontos in so einen Trupp reinbringen.
of your
Du
charge
kannst
here,
den ja nicht
and you're
targeten, wenn du kein
charging from
Position hast.
here
Das
with
heißt,
a
er kann
squad. In the current edition,
kämpfen. Und dann
you
geht
can
der in
charge here to get
Base-Kontakt.
with engagement, and then these guys, as long as
Und
they
dann kannst du
coherence,
alle
can move,
verschiedenen Modelle
you know,
in
like
Base-Kontakt mit ihm
parallel,
stellen.
or if you
Richtig
have a
viele.
larger squad and enough models, you could have guys who end up
Dann
moving
hast du
like
richtig
this
viele
as part of
Einheiten, die
charge.
aus 2 Reihen
And they're almost
zuschlagen
moving
können.
away from the target, which is a little bit strange, and it's one of the things I think people
Das
kind of
ist
complain
gerade
about. Is that
interessant mit den
now everything has
Phönixkönigen
to
der
move
Elder.
toward the target, and if it can get into base contact, it must.
It must, yeah.
So when you
It's a big
charge,
thing, must.
like charging is to charge. Charging isn't to creatively run away from targets toward objectives. And so that's an important little change because it improves just a little bit of the quality of life of the edition and how it feels to play and move models around on the battlefield in the way that you're apparently being told to do.
Yeah, we might see that epic challenge. That was pointed out in the chat. We definitely might see that.
Yep, if Karandras survives, Karandras is throwing some swings at that Lord Leontis,
Lord Solar may use the epic
The
challenge.
Lord Solar
I
could.
mean, that's the thing. It's
that's
like
a really good point.
he's got a decent amount of attacks. Great profile on his weapon.
Yep, that's a really good point. Andrew even just creatively did some of his movements in order to make sure that he got himself in position to hit. Now, the Aeldari have used a stratagem, lightning fast reactions, which makes them -1 to hit.
That is something, people are kind of
They're
familiar
getting
with.
dodgy. This is going to help a lot because it takes those Death Core. Now, has that Death Core squad taken any damage at this point in the game? Is a real question because if they have, they get a +1 to hit.
That every plus is going to count. I
It's
think
really
this is
gonna
a
count.
bit of a risky maneuver. Not quite a gambit. We might see those later.
Yep, and it doesn't look like he's using Lord Solar's ability to heroic or like nasty challenge.
The epic challenge.
Nick
Ja, Karandras verschlagen.
stoned a bunch of saves, so Leontis swung at his unit. He's got a really high AP on his attacks. Scorpions, though, his aspect warriors have a 5-up invulnerable save, and you just saw it. Nick rolled 3 straight invuls.
That's pretty good.
So
It is nice when the dice just cooperate, like
the
we're talking
Exarch
about. Like,
has
you don't necessarily
survived.
have to have those fate dice in your
Yep.
back pocket. Sometimes you can just roll.
and it's a dangerous moment. The Exarch survived. Karandra survived.
It is a well-known fact that 5s are the most reliable number in the game.
And an interesting question here is, Karandra still in coherency with the other Scorpion in the unit?
Great question. I'll have to
Warner, why don't you go
double-check.
ask the players whether or
Yeah.
not...
If they would like to, potentially revise how the casualties are pulled.
Nick has pulled those casualties, though. All right, these are attacks back from Nick, so unfortunately there's quite a few attacks that come from that Exarch and from Karandras himself. The real question is whether he's going to use his epic challenge to go after Leontis.
If you get an opportunity to put some attacks directly on a super character, I think you do it. Yeah, with the fact is that you don't get those opportunities every day. If he's alive to swing, he's could potentially make it real hard for your own characters. Talk about
Karandras hat Sustained Hits, deswegen legt er da gerade so viele Würfel wieder mit rein. Die Frage, die sich stellt, ich habe das vorhin, glaube ich,
All right, the
gelesen.
important thing here is Nick has chosen to sacrifice the Exarch in the future, basically. He's known the fate of the Exarch.
Jetzt legt er die 4 raus.
Because the casualties pulled. He did not want to pull that Exarch. And so at the end of the turn, when coherency is checked for casualties, one of those models is going to die. I'm assuming he's not going to kill Karandras at the end of the turn. So
Probably not.
that
That's not the way you want the Phoenix Lord to go out.
casualties will finish the Exarch off, but you're going to have Karandras.
Keine Mortal Wounds.
There's going to be a fair bit of damage coming in from just that Exarch and Karandras, because again, what do they do to infantry?
Yeah, blend them up.
Blending infantry is exactly how it works. So, where are we at here, Paul? What do you think is going to happen?
I think he's going to kill a few guardsmen. I really do think he should use that epic challenge, though.
I think he just wants to pick up models. I figure once those models are gone, he's thinking, I've got Bright Lances. I can take out a Lord
Picking
Solar.
up models is easy for the Aeldari. Getting shots at Lord Solar or Leontis.
Is it easy? He's still got his Warp Spiders. But Andrew did kill the Avengers and has killed most of the Scorpions. So Nick's ability to kill large swaths of infantry at once is reduced. And remember, Andrew has 2 CP. And he has not used his 4 CP. So Andrew has the ability, when the squad dies, to just bring it right back.
You know what makes that less attractive? Killing Lord Solar Leontis.
Karandras, by the way, with his exploding attacks, did 9 AP, 1 wounds, and killed 6 guardsmen. So certainly they're suffering some punishment for having gone after Corandris here.
Aber was wir hier zum Beispiel auch
Lightning
sehen,
fast
ist,
reactions.
dass Verluste
That is
gar
good.
nicht mehr so
Yeah, that's
relevant
really
sind.
good.
Die Einheit
Decker's
weggeschockt
Warner, I need to
jetzt.
step away from the table
Aber
and
da
check
ist ein
on a
Command-Spot
couple
mit
of
dem
things
Banner
here.
drin, das heißt, der kontrolliert den
Take
Marker
over this
trotzdem.
stream of Paul for just a minute while I step
Ready to
away.
go.
-1 does not sound like a lot, but when you're looking, you're dealing with the factor of what a D6 is. Moving that die 1 pip is huge.
It is, and the other thing is, part of the only reason that Nick had anybody left at the end of this was because he got a little bit lucky on his 5-up invulnerable saves, which those Scorpions have.
Yeah, those and other aspect warriors too. They come equipped with the invulnerable save.
Right. So, you know, had he not done the lightning fast on top of that, it might have been the difference.
Again, huge play right here. I think he could have gone either way. You can make an argument for how that combat shook out either way. Do you focus on the troops, get those models off the table? Do you focus on the characters? They've obviously chosen to go for the troops.
Looks like Andrew's moving the servo skulls now. Again, part of the primary here.
And I think he's checking Battle Shock as well. I think I heard him say something like that.
So Battle Shock.
Remember, you're trying to roll over the die roll there.
Yep, that
It
looks
looks like
like a
Nick-
good roll.
Yep.
That looked like a 10.
Yep.
And actually, I'm wondering if from killing models, if that might have been part of why he chose to swing on the unit rather than try to go into Lord Solar with the Epic Challenge or something like that. Because if he killed enough guys, he could probably get them back into coherency with his
The pilot consolidate,
yeah.
try to get yep.
Right.
Very possible. That is one way to do it. I don't know. I mean,
Not sure.
part of me just wants me to think look, it's very possible that the Epic Challenge was the last thing on their mind.
Yeah. These command points might not be entirely
Wir sind
correct
jetzt auf jeden Fall
either.
im Bottom of
Nick
2.
used Lightning Fast.
Die diskutieren gerade so ein bisschen, was da die Taktik war, wieso
But I'm sure there's some other
Nick
strategies
nicht auf
Nick's
Leontus
trying to
geschlagen hat und so
launch.
weiter.
So we just get some scoring. Andrew did get 4 points on no prisoners, 3 for over.
Also eigentlich will ich jetzt noch die Warp Spiders sehen.
It's gonna bring his secondary total up to 50.
Mal gucken, was da
Nick
so
did
bei
pass
rauskommt.
all of his Battle Shock tests.
Ich will sehen, wie schnell die sich bewegen. Ich will sehen, wie die zuhauen. Ich habe 2 Trupps davon bemalt bei mir hier zu Hause. Ich will die spielen und wenn Nick Nanavati die in seinem Testspiel dabei hat, dann sind die wahrscheinlich nicht so schlecht.
Servo skulls into your opponent's side of the board. 13 for primary for Andrew.
With these the maneuvering here, he is right. I think he can bring back. I don't think that reserves stratagem is only once per game. Is that correct?
The reinforcements.
Reinforcements. Yep.
Nope. And you know, one thing we have not really emphasized that I think is a great change with new 40K. There are 6 stratagems for your detachment.
Yep.
There, you know, it's not pages and pages of super nuanced things that you have to say, oh wait, do I have a thing that triggers in this, you know, niche scenario?
How you build your list, how you put it together, it kind of slots in to figure out exactly what rules you're going to be playing with. It's all pretty much easy to figure that out.
Yep. So here's that reinforcement stratagem again. Again, you can use it at any phase for a regiment unit that was just destroyed. No limit on how many times you can do this. It is 2 command points, so it is costly. Lord Solar being in Andrew's list is helping kind of provide the bank of command
Stark
points
secondary.
to be able to do this a few times.
Remember that you get 1 command point per turn. Each player, you can generate 1 command point. Lord Solar Leontis on your turn lets you generate that extra command point, so you can kind of rack them up pretty quick as long as you're not spending them.
Yep. So really good ability. I got a question in chat about kind of the speed of the game. Keep in mind that this is one of the first times ever this new edition's been played, so folks are learning on the fly here. These are some world-class players, but they are still new to the rules.
Also being a little conversational and stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's Friday night. We're at a weekend-long Warhammer event. Folks are having a good time.
There is something about the time that Warhammer players take to play the game.
Yeah, And like we said, Andrew and Nick go a long ways back, many years. These guys are great friends. They're having
Also
a
wild.
blast.
They're both
Ich bin echt gespannt, wie sich das Spiel entwickelt.
measuring things, figuring out where they can be, try to get
Ich will jetzt auf jeden Fall dieses Warp-Spider-Ding sehen.
Hashtag Cough. Saturday.
Ich denke, ich werde so bis
Might be
5
Saturday morning for a
Uhr
lot of
streamen.
folks in chat.
Look, we haven't asked. Where's everybody tuning in from? We know some folks are watching from
Yeah.
all over the world. We're definitely going to show some data sheets.
Should we sneak one in while
Let's
Mike's
sneak
away?
one in. Let's sneak in.
What do you want to sneak in?
The Viper.
Viper?
Yeah.
All right, let's check out the Viper.
Get the Viper coming up right now.
Oh, Mike's
We're
coming up.
we're
Mike's
committed
walking
at this
over
point.
here. Can I get it
Maryland,
in? before he
Texas,
gets it in?
Michigan, Germany, Australia, Ireland, Sweden.
Oh, he's here. But I hit it. I hit it before he got there.
There we go. Movement.
Viper
Very
Datenblatt, sehr geil.
fast.
Very fast in those
Toughness
Vipers.
6.
And of course, we see
Fest zur
another case
Bewegung,
of
also
where
wir
we've
sehen
taken,
die Grace in der Bewegung durch die
strategy
ganze,
kind of a thing
durch
and
die
put it
ganze,
onto
durch die
the
ganze
unit.
Bank.
And so while you might not normally take
Toughness
Vipers
6.
in terms of the raw efficiency of their stat lines, you kind of
Ähm,
want to have Vipers. They're fast, which is useful. They also can give your army an effective buff when they're trying to get rid of a unit because
oh, jetzt
they
gucken
can
wir
pick
Harassment
any
Fire.
unit that was hit
In
by
the
one
shooting
of their
phase,
attacks
after this model has
and
shot, select one enemy
subsequently
unit
make that unit
that was
lose
hit
the
by
benefit
one or
of
more
cover
of these
for
attacks until
harassment
the end
fire?
of the phase.
harassment fire. So it's really interesting because
Ignore cover.
again,
Whew.
in the new edition, there's going to be situations where you're going to take multiples of the same powerful unit because of the way that army construction works. You're also going to feel incentivized that you can't just do only that because you're not going to be able to have some of these powerful buffs that make all those units function better. So armies that use combined arms, combined abilities, a diversity of units that have key components to them and how they work together is going to be kind of one of the hallmarks force instead of forced to by the particular structure of a force organization chart or similar. T6 is definitely fragile for a vehicle in the new edition. We noticed that, Andrew has a variety of weapons like the Basilisks that aren't particularly good at dealing with heavy armor or your standard
Autocannons,
T10
too.
tanks, but, autocannons and other things now wound these quite easily. And so it fits into sort of that range where, well, it's squishy for a vehicle, I suppose. It's still got the same
Also,
toughness as a
Viper ist okay.
Blight Lord
Ignore cover is
Terminator
stark.
like we saw yesterday.
I got you, Kirill.
But it's actually more fragile than two Blight Lord Terminators in the sense at the same time. So,
And look at all
Du
the
wirst auf
weapon
jeden Fall
options too,
pingen damit.
too. You can
Das sind
basically
die Brightlands, das
have
ist
this,
natürlich
this
cool.
profile in your army
Um,
with that rule and have a basically swap out the weapons as you see fit for whoever your opponents are.
absolutely.
quasi
All right, so we
Tracer
have new
Rounds und
secondary
dann,
objectives that have been drawn by Nick in this particular mission. So
Dann
what
kommen
is
die richtigen Lanzen.
drawn for the
Das macht
round there?
AP3
We have
auf
up
der
on screen
Brightlands
the
natürlich
second
auch nochmal
course. The
besser.
secondaries, they're both playing tactical objectives, which means they're scoring all the time. So attempting target and defend stronghold. This is arguably a good turn for Andrew on the objectives front, depending upon Nick's mobility. So attempting target basically means that you pick one of those objectives in no man's land, and his
Hier
opponent
sehen wir nochmal
decides
zwei
which one
Secondaries.
Nick has to go after.
Beide wieder
Additionally,
nicht Preset.
Nick
Die kannst du
can
wieder
defend
nicht
stronghold.
vorher nehmen,
He
nicht
won't
fixed.
score it until
Sondern Tacticals.
Andrew's turn is over, but he'll score 3 VP if he continues to control the objective marker in his deployment zone. This is an interesting case where tactical objectives can make primary missions more interesting than they were originally. It's the deploy servo skulls mission, and so those servo skulls in no man's land are the only ones that count for the primary. But you still have these other two objectives on the board. You go, well, why do you even keep them on the board? Well, it's because there are things like defense stronghold that come into play with the tactical objectives.
I'd like to mention that I love blow drones as well.
And we got
Blood drones are adorable, aren't they?
I like blight haulers.
Speaking of
Blight
adorable,
haulers are cool too.
Speaking of adorable, I just have to give a shout out to I think my my beautiful wife Brittany, my son Holden are watching from home right now, and I'm pretty sure I can tell already. He's only 17 months old, but he is clearly already smart enough to beat me in Warhammer. And I wonder who else do we have on the stream who has a kid that they're hoping will play Warhammer with them one day, or a partner who is all into the Warhammer game and showing them what's up. Who here plays Warhammer as a family is my curiosity at the moment.
That's a great question. I'd love to see that kind of stuff.
Dad Hammer life is really is. I mean, that's what I'm feeling at the moment anyway.
It's one of those things. Warhammer's just always been around. Of course, I've been playing Warhammer for a long time. I got Warhammer stuff around.
Your Warhammer stuff is around, so the kids see him.
So, wir haben die Warp Spiders, die jetzt sich bewegen.
Hey, let's play
Und
some Warhammer. At least not when they're in
super fast.
You go through stages life.
Gerade über 20 Zoll da hochgeflogen sind.
What's this stuff, Dad? Like, I'm going to show you. Great question. Let's go do this.
That's It's a fascinating hobby and how it infects folks, young and old. It reminds me of my dad and I were younger. He would say, play golf, Mike, you play it whether you're 9 or 99. And I say, play Warhammer, you can play it whether you're 9 or 99. And maybe that's my passion of the moment. So I think we're a little bit overdue for, well, no, we just showed a Viper. So let's focus in on what's happening here on the battlefield. So Nick is now needing to push objectives back. So did Andrew get one of those objectives into Nick's deployment zone this turn?
Yeah, it's gone. It's moved.
Is that how we got to the 13
He got
primary?
13, yeah.
So what Andrew did is he pushed this center objective back to the middle, where it doesn't count necessarily for anything, so it's neutral. He also pushed this objective wholly within 6 inches of Nick's deployment zone. It's just right there, kind of on the line. And then he's got this other one that's gotten, or sorry, no. So this one actually must have gotten just in. So this is the 8-point objective, and this one here is the 5-point objective. So that's where you get the 13. Yep. This is a 0-point objective. And I guess I'm catching up late. When I was stepping away, you guys have already covered this off. So 13 on the primary. Nick is now going to be faced with the uphill battle of having to push those skulls all the way back across. I wonder if a Gambit will come into play.
He's got to be close to do it.
He's got to be close to do it. Well, it'll be interesting to see. One of the things about the Gambits that are really important, it's one of those mission criteria that have popped up and have been a bit of a thing that people have been talking about and curious about. And what do we design them for and what they for? First off, they are meant in many ways for competitive tournament play. It's one of the main design principles behind the concept of the Gambit. And it's very much like your Hail Mary in a game of NFL American football.
Ah, da hat irgendjemand nämlich gedacht. So.
I'm just gonna stick with that. It's late UK. We'll hope we got some Americans here.
Also,
football is
was wir
with
hier
me.
sehen, ist auf jeden Fall eine Mission, wo du sagen
The way
kannst,
Hail Mary works is if you're losing by a fair amount in a game of football,
da kannst du auf jeden Fall ein Gambit riskieren.
And we might have a table update here soon, so if it interrupts my soliloquy on the Gambit, I'll let you know. And if you're in a really close game that's back and forth, you're not going to just start throwing Hail Marys for the heck of it. You're just going to keep trying to win the game.
Ich würde jetzt auch echt gerne dieses Warp-Spider-Datenblatt sehen, ey.
It's late in the game. It's late in the game. The sun's getting real low, and it's close as can be, but you're just down by 1 score, and you got no time to run it all the way up the field. That Hail Mary provides a really close game, that chance and suspense right into the last minute.
It's got to be attainable. It's got to be close. In the same way that only 6 points, would shift the balance.
Exactly.
It's not something you can just bank on. It's basically not pay attention to the points of the mission.
So viele Datenblätter, die wir noch sehen wollen. Das ist verrückt. Das ist einfach verrückt.
Mathematically, it's not even possible, but you're close. There's a risk you can do.
Yep. And in the case of
ein bisschen über die Gambits, die kommen nächste Runde.
I can see the Gambit becoming a thing because Nick is definitely doing some serious damage to Andrew, but Andrew has dominating position in terms of where those servo skulls are. And Nick's going to need several turns of pushing them in another direction in order to start earning 8 points himself. So if Andrew can have another 1 or 2 good turns of servo skull point scoring, Nick is going to be facing an uphill battle on primary, and he may have to pivot to a Gambit because he may start to destroy most of Andrew's army. But if the servo skulls got pushed too far before that happened, he's going to have to find another avenue to victory. And it's the rare case where Gambit might actually be wise because he'll have dominance on the field, but maybe be too far behind on primary. And so that's what that's there for, is where the game's clearly well in hand for one player, but they just fell behind early. And rather than go, well, I guess we have to call it, it gives that interesting avenue to victory to keep the game suspenseful to the end.
You give up scoring your primary points, and you got to be focused on something else.
That's
we
it.
got an update from the table? The Torox has survived a bunch of fire. Starting off with the fusion pistols doing a bunch of damage.
The Hero Torox. It's called the Herox. And it is basically at 1 wound. That's what you got right there.
It's a Herox.
The Herox, yeah. And the Herox has gone through an entire shooting phase. We were just talking up the Herox.
But did it have a deadly demise?
It still took, basically.
Did not have a deadly
demise. It did not explode.
demise.
It casually went out. Disembarkation is now occurring. An explosion did not occur, but that thing did suffer through an entire amount of fire before actually going down.
Deadly demise would have actually been really bad for Nick if that had happened.
Nick's weak to things like explosive auras, like deadly demise, because he's got a bunch of very small squads with very high value models. Those warp spiders, I believe, are something like 20 points each. And so while they're very powerful, they don't really want to have
Also wir
things
wissen auf jeden Fall, dass
explode
die Warp Spiders
all.
20
So
Punkte
it'll be interesting
kosten.
to see how the rest of this goes over the course of the game. Who is winning is a good question in the chat. It's hard to say. The new edition's missions are built.
Ich würde jetzt auch gerne mal wissen, wie die Warp Spiders, wie viele Punkte die Warp Spiders
The
sind.
game is going a little bit sideways in one way or another, and
Well, when you score certain things, sometimes the player has not had the opportunity to score it yet.
Yep.
So you kind of stagger the way the scoring works, and so who is winning? Who has the upper hand right now? Andrew, but it's also Andrew has completed his turn.
Ich habe gerade gelesen in Discord, der Lim ist tatsächlich dabei, dieses Match zu judgen. Der gute Junge.
Release. Well, this Leviathan mission is from the Leviathan mission deck, which is in every box of Leviathan. So now you'll have 9 primaries and an infinite combination of randomly generated missions. The only war mission is there for you to get familiar with the game, but whether you play casual match play or whether you're heading to a tournament, you'll have the Leviathan deck and the outcomes of it right away.
So can we just see the points of an intercessor?
Folks are asking to see. No, we're not. No more points. You guys got one hint, and it was imprecise, and that was on purpose. Points are coming.
Nobody knows. I can
soon.
say nobody knows.
Points are coming soon. So the data sheets, we've got Tech Priest Warner doing table side updates and checking on what's happening because it's an interesting turn. Nick is trying to do a fair bit of work here, but it has taken him a lot of resource to get rid of things like Tauroxes.
Having to spend multiple units to destroy the Taurox, I guess kind of expected with the type of firepower that he had, but he really expected the fusion pistols, which are basically kind of like, they work like melted stuff.
Yep. And we are going to have to see how that all pans out, and whether or not that cost of resources is going to leave him in a situation where things like his warp spiders and whatnot cannot deal with the other threats that are on the tabletop. So, Tech Priest Warner's over there taking an assessment of the table, and we'll give you an update when we have it as far as the detail and nuance goes. But we'll see that Nick is being forced because of the way the primary works. This is really a fascinating thing. If we were looking at a traditional primary mission, some of the older style ones like Take and Hold, you'd have objectives that were basically sitting in the 4 traditional spots. But because they move, and because moving them is bad and you have to fight back, Nick can't just simply sit on a couple of objectives. He has to start shoving them back toward Andrew, and he has to have positioned units forward so that they don't just immediately kick back at him and score that same 13 points every single turn. So
there's a push here.
He's having to send. He's moved up a lot of models. He's pushed things forward, and that puts them into danger zones as well, where they can be fought back on. He's had to move up his Storm Guardian squad here as well with his Farseer, and so he's really advancing up the board in order to try to push that objective control. And in the process, that's going to provide Andrew with opportunities to fire back at him, to do things in return, and we're going to see what happens. Damage is now going into the Sentinels. But again,
Stefan, Spaß beim Arbeiten.
Points, and as a result of those command points, the ability to bring back.
Danke, ich werde nachher hoffentlich schlafen können.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting seeing Nick's rolling a lot of dice. I'm seeing a lot of 2s, a lot of 1s. Andrew's very happy. He's not getting one shot this turn. That's a direct quote. That's happening from across the table.
Going into the Sentinels there, I think that's what he was planning on.
Yeah, he was hoping to just pick up all those.
Re-killing those Sentinels.
Not going to happen.
Those Sentinels might be on the rinse and repeat plan.
Oh, well, Tech Priest Warner has come back from observing that table. Give us the skinny as they
Third time might be the charm with the Sentinels.
There's just a lot of good vibes at the table, a lot of laughing. I think you might have heard a little bit of that on the mic.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I think is important to mention is that you've got a couple guys who've known each other for years. They've played at the top of their game in the tournament, but they've also played sort of, in every manner, in every way. They've got beautiful armies, and they know each other really well. Also, Nick, lauded player that he is on a 10-game losing streak against Andrew, who's now cheering over there. And I just can't imagine that's good for Nick.
This is not just an exhibition game. Like, this game matters.
No, and we actually told folks, so, I saw some comments yesterday on the stream that made me want to reinforce this. We literally told them, look, even if it means the game goes pear-shaped at some point, take the gloves off. Just play your very best game and see what happens. And so we're going to see both of them taking every advantage they can find, getting creative, exploring the insides and outsides of the new rules.
With their level of familiarity with the game right now. Yeah,
yep, and you're seeing it on the fly. There's things they're probably missing, but it's only because they're missing it. They're actually really getting deep into these rules and seeing exactly what happens.
There's going to be lots of strategies, lots of things that you can wring out.
Have the warp spiders begun?
Your hand.
Yes, and have the warp spiders begun to shoot yet, Warner? Did they have to get used to get rid of that Taurox, basically?
I don't think so. I think Azerman is the only thing that finished it off.
Well, then we need to take a look at that warp spider data sheet finally. Do people want to see the warp spiders, or should we keep it off?
Should
we just keep holding it off? Let's see what the stream has to say. 'Cause last time they said, nah, we don't need to see whatever the unit was. And if everybody says nah this time, then no, we're not going to show the warp spiders.
Toy Soldiers is serious.
Okay, so people want to see the warp spider. All right, so we're going to bring them out. All right, so
Da sind sie.
what do we got here? have a really interesting unit. It's going to seem there's a bit of a trend here in Aspect Warriors for what they focus on, which tends to be anti-infantry roles, except for a couple ones we don't necessarily see in this battle. We can keep you guys guessing on. Maybe we'll see later in the weekend. Flicker jump is one of the most interesting rules, I think, that the whole Aspect Warrior range has. So they move 12 inches normally, but they can instead choose to move 24 at the risk of taking 1 mortal wound on the unit. And if they do flicker jump, they can't charge, but it can put them in some really interesting places on the board. And when they do that, they have themselves torrent weapons with devastating wounds, and this is potentially devastating.
It is. Could be crippling.
Weapon.
Yeah.
One of the more powerful units. Also, they interact really fascinatingly with Overwatch, because while they can move and then move it, because they'll have two spinners on the
Devastating
Exarch, they can
Wounds.
shoot 66 automatic hits.
24 Zoll Bewegung, das ist eine solide Einheit.
Does a mortal wound. So I see some people going,
Bewegung kann man nicht, einfach nicht unterschätzen. Wenn die 100 Punkte kosten, sind die Staple in jeder Liste. Der Output ist okay. Devastating Wounds, wie gesagt, cool. Für 6. Also die haben 6 für 6 Schuss.
Yep, so an incredibly interesting, incredibly dangerous unit. Of course, at the same time, they are still T3 1-wound models, and they are quite expensive. So you have to use them carefully, judiciously. And of course, if you have a creative opponent, they can't do things like automatically fall back and shoot and whatnot. And we saw that
Aber du machst halt
early in the game where Andrew
Auto-Hits.
pushed off
Richtig
its
viele.
ability to deploy those warp spiders by charging into them with some scout sentinels early on. And by doing that, it shut them down so that it took them a little extra time to actually start getting those death spinners into play.
So we just heard the Rattlings were destroyed by the Shadow Weaver.
Well, dang. The Rattlings shot sharp. They scarpered. They got some points. They actually earned quite a few points for Andrew.
That was actually a good swing. It influenced a lot of decisions on Nick's side of the table just by them being on the table.
But then they got, well, they got
Well, they are toughness too, and there's only so far they can scarper when they're already deep in the
scarper far enough.
Jetzt müssen wir noch den Shadows hier sehen und ich bin Shadow Weaver sehen und ich bin
Does
zufrieden.
Nick have a Baharoth? We don't have a Baharoth here. I can tell you the Baharoth can no longer jump off the table every time he fights. So he's a little bit more grounded, but he's still a fascinating model with some really interesting rules.
He jumps a little bit.
He does do some jumping. He's still Baharoth. Let's be clear. But a little more, engaged with the game as opposed to constantly departing the battlefield.
I do like that.
So we've got some interesting movements going on here. We've got Calvin, one of our judges, doing some measurement checks to make sure what they want to have happen is legal. It looks like a charge attempt is going on there with Azerman and the surviving Dire Avenger Exarch, actually.
So tell Andrew to stop looking at those Dire Avengers until we get their data slate. They just stay on the table.
It looks like he's short, too. It looks like that charge isn't going to happen. Oh, nope. He made the move. He was able to get there.
Heard a yay.
Nick is very happy. A yay is coming from the table.
I said you must get into base if you can.
Someone's asked, this is a typical 10th edition table setup for match play. So this is a relatively dense board from many parts of the battlefield, but open in the center. Yesterday we saw a board that was quite dense in the center. And yes, yesterday and today we've shown 2 of quite a few recommended match play terrain layouts that we'll be unveiling over the somewhat near future. And we've done our best to present a variety of options for a variety of different organizers and individuals for what makes a good, interesting battlefield for a typical pickup match play game.
Well, I mean, let's actually diagnose that a little bit. So what you want is of course, lanes of fire. You want to create the kind of situations that make people, maybe you're trying to work for it or you're using it as cover. You want areas where assault armies can be viable. You want them to have areas they can run to and maybe seek that benefit of cover, which is in everything present in the rules. You basically want the terrain to function for any types of units that a player may bring to the table.
Yep, and we're going to give a little update on that, but actually I think the stream has helped us out with something. That Striking Scorpion Exarch was agreed as out of coherency and should be dead.
Go check on that.
So we were calling the earlier turn, and Nick wanted to keep that Exarch alive in order to make his swings, but he was out of coherency when that happened. So thank you, stream, for helping out these new folks.
That's one of the things. Folks watching the game, they want a clean outcome.
Indeed. Why wouldn't they? You will see me in Tacoma, absolutely.
Sieht auf jeden Fall wie ein wildes Spiel aus, wenn die da einen Schiedsrichter dazu holen, der das ausmisst.
We found out we have actually, as should be the way, this isn't a tournament setting, friendly game. They had agreed that the Exarch could easily have moved into coherency and would have had to. In fact, when it piled in, they just were, well, like all of us do. They were enjoying the equivalent of that casual Friday evening beer and pretzel game, and making sure that they are giving each other grace in their game. And so if they miss a little thing, they're not changing the whole outcome just because someone didn't move a model an extra inch.
There we go.
Excellent to hear.
Solved
Make sure we're still
on
having
that.
the right kind of Warhammer vibes here in the table. All right, so there's a lot of fighting going on. Azerman now
I
looks
think
like...
we're about to see some fighting with Lord Solar Leontes.
Ah, so Solar survived. His meat shields got in the way, as they say. And now we have the swingbacks coming from Leontes at some point here.
Utilizing that protection of the unit there.
Indeed. I wonder, I suppose he's going to swing at Azerman's squad.
I thought he was picking up dice. I thought it was already his time to strike.
Maybe he has some other charges that have been made that get to swing first in the case of Nick.
There are a few charges, some Storm Guardians charged.
One of the interesting things here to talk about is when we talk about charges, the charge phase timing has changed a lot, actually. And when I say it's changed a lot, currently, in the current edition, there is a variety of different rule structure that is oriented around when you fight. Fight first, charging units that fight first, rules that fight first, rules that make you fight not first, rules that make you fight last. And they all work together, but there's quite a few of them. And so in this case, we actually have either units that fight first or units that fight normally. And the defending player for the turn, whoever's turn it is not, chooses first. Except, of course, they can't choose first if they don't have fights first. We saw yesterday with the Death Guard,
Fight First.
unit
Super
was
starke
really
Fähigkeit, die sie
interesting,
da zeigen.
rule from one of its
Du kämpfst einfach
models
zuerst.
that gave the unit fight
Und
first.
zwar
And
der
that
Spieler,
meant
der
that
nicht am
when you
Zug ist.
charge them,
Super stark.
charging units gain fight first. They had fight first. They're defending player. So actually, it's a very powerful defensive ability because if you charge a unit that has fights first, it will get to fight before the charging unit that charged it.
Da muss man echt abwägen, ob man die chargen will oder nicht, diese Fight
Today,
First Units.
we can see that ability here. We also have a request since they're in combat. I
That
suppose
whole
it's
phase
time.
of the game, though, is a nuanced. It's still nuanced.
Still
it's just a
very
little bit
nuanced.
less complex, and it should be straightforward to explain, straightforward to perform on the tabletop.
Yes, complexity without needless complexity is the way to say it. Simpler without being simple.
That was not a great roll from Andrew, and I do think that is Lord Solar's
It's a
attacks.
bit of a whiff.
Now
from
he
the
only needs
attacks
twos
there.
to hit,
Get a few ones in that roll.
but there was a few more ones than he was probably.
Die wollten uns die Storm Guardians zeigen. Kommt schon, Jungs.
Sub-ideal. Oh, no, looks like he might be actually rolling it now.
Wahrscheinlich waren das einfach die Veterans, die dann noch gekämpft haben.
A similar number of
And
attacks.
there's his 6 attacks, so 5 of them hit. Wounding on 2, so he's got 4 wounds through with his Sword of Conquest. And he must, so Nick carefully made sure not to pile into Leontes with his Corandris, and so these actually
There
are
we
going
go.
into the Aeldari squad.
Oh no!
Oh, and what has happened? So he's killed the Exarch. Did Azerman make his saves? There was a data sheet on the screen just at the wrong time, and I'm not sure what those rolls were. It looks like Azerman may have survived, but the Avenger squad is down. Now we come to the data sheet on those Storm Guardians. What? do
Bin ich mal
Storm
gespannt, was die
Why
Storm
do
Guardians so
Guardians
können.
instead of Defender Guardians?
Look, he likes to get up close and personal.
Why don't you take a look at it, Paul, and see what you heard gut reaction.
Movement 7, I like that. Getting that little speed of the Aeldari there. 4+ save, I think as we would expect. 2 objective secure, or objective control is pretty good.
Ja, man, that's say
Versuch's
too.
grad ein bisschen zu erfassen.
Stormblade's ability.
Dauert
that
alles ein
is
bisschen
an
länger, jetzt sind wir
ability
langsam
that I
echt
think
müde.
is just absolutely fantastic. It's a
Aeldari
critical
Power
part of the
Swords.
game. A lot of armies have units that might have this
Guardian Combat
ability,
Weapons.
and effectively it means that you can stick
Complete
an
wasted.
objective with your Storm Guardians. So we know that in this game, the servo skulls are really the most important component to that primary score, but you want to make sure you hold your back objective in case you draw a tactical objective that requires you to do it. And also, given the fact that controlling the servo skulls lets them move in both players' turn, if you can control a servo skull in your command phase with those Storm Guardians,
macht
then it remains
sticky.
yours until they get an enemy unit
Das machen
near it.
normale Guardians nicht, die geben dir Fate Dice.
So,
Das ist
While the
okay.
Guardian Defenders we've seen previewed on Warhammer Community do indeed have the ability to potentially generate new Fate Dice, the Storm Guardians have the ability to stick an objective for you quickly, and because Guardians are a rather fragile unit that don't necessarily last very long, it's quite valuable to have a unit that can stick an objective in your backfield before things like indirect fire and other things get rid of them.
Push them up. It's like,
Yeah.
what, you got to get through them and possibly, waste another turn of movement, try to get back to the objective that they previously claimed.
Absolutely, which is pretty powerful and interesting. Interesting, someone mentioned Death Guard of the Army without a sticky objective. Well, the Army's detachment rule is everything is sticky objectives. So Death Guard are just quite good at sticking it with all of their units. necessarily needed on a single individual unit.
Bin ich skeptisch.
Nick has gotten 12 primaries for pushing back, so he's got 2 that are wholly within 6.
So, Gentlemen, aber es ist jetzt
must
kurz
be
vor
of
5.
Andrew's deployment zone.
Ich schaff's nicht mehr.
3
3 Stunden habe ich gesagt.
Quick check here, so I see.
Wenn euch das gefallen hat,
Andrew's,
die Coverage hier und das bisschen reden über Elder-Sachen, ich bin auf jeden Fall gehypt auf die Elder. Ich hoffe, die zeigen jetzt noch was. Wir werden auf jeden Fall es wird auf jeden Fall Reddit-Posts geben. Das heißt, wir werden auf jeden Fall auch nochmal drüber gucken. Aber ey, Jungs, ich kann echt nicht mehr. Lasst ein Like da, kommentiert fleißig. Ich muss jetzt ins Bett gehen. Papa ist müde. Danke allen, die zugeschaut haben. Wie gesagt, allen danke nochmal, die das nachschauen. Lasst, wie gesagt, ein Like da. Ich kann mich nicht mehr konzentrieren. Gute Nacht.
So placing these servo skulls is critical, and getting them in just the right spot is going to be